could you all please remain standing for prayers, which Councillor Jackson has kindly agreed to lead.
Let us pray. Oh God, our Father, we thank you for the privilege we have of serving the people of this town. And we do pray for our residents and visitors as they enjoy the splendid weather that we're having so lately. And oh Lord, we do ask a blessing on all that we discuss this evening, that it may be in the interests of our residents and the interests of those who come here. We think of those members who can't be with us this evening, especially Councillor Smith and Councillor Matthews. Councillor Smith has lost his father, and we do think of the family at this time of sadness and ask for your comfort and strength. And we pray for Alan, as Angela is not well, and we ask your blessing upon her too. So in Jesus' name, we ask you to be with us, and let us share in the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Please be seated. Ooh. Right. All right. Right, thank you, councillors. We'll start with declarations of interest, if anybody has any. Oh, sorry, we won't. Oh, God, you can tell them back, can't you? What? It says declarations of interest here, item 1. They've given me a different agenda. Hang on. Right, apologies for absence. Do we have any official apologies? No. Councillor Jackson has mentioned a couple of people. Also, the Mayor is sorry he can't be here. It's not an official apology, we can't. But he has a family occasion, which is why they aren't here. Right, declarations of interest. Councillor Blackman.
Apologies, Madam Deputy Mayor. I am a member of the Lancashire Fire Authority, so I wish to declare a personal interest in the notice of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
Yes, Madam Mayor, exactly the same. Item 6A, personal interest.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, same motion, same personal interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Right, item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Is it? Thank you. All in agreement? Thank you. Item 4, item 3, sorry, the announcements. A couple of announcements. You all know, I'm sure you're all aware, that it is Armed Forces Week. And Blackpool do, I think, better than any other town. We don't just have an Armed Forces Day. We have a week absolutely packed with events. We have veterans coming from all over the country for the week. And a lot of our businesses do join in and offer a lot to the veterans as well, which I'm sure we're all grateful for, as well as the veterans. And the Mayor has asked that if you can, to be with him at the Cenotaph on Sunday at 11 a.m. for the service, and then there will be a march past afterwards. Well, also, I wanted to just mention, a couple of weeks ago, I went to the Blackpool and Fylde College Students of the Year Awards, and I was very delighted when our members of staff actually won her category. There were quite a few people shortlisted, and Terry Carmody was the winner of the Blackpool and Fylde College Higher Education Student of the Year Award in Computing. And I'm pleased to say she is working in our computers here. So isn't it nice that we do as usual, have the best with our staff. And many congratulations, I think, from us all to Terry. Well done. Right. Oh, my eyes. Public representation. I think you've all seen that Mr. Clayton has asked to defer, and he is now hoping to attend in September to speak to us. So we move on to item 5, which is the petition, the public representation. We have Mr. Bennison here. Welcome, Mr. Bennison. I believe you have had it explained to you about how long you can speak for up to 5 minutes, but don't feel obliged to give us a song to make up the 5 minutes. But we're happy for up to 5 minutes for what you say. And then the relevant cabinet member, Councillor Mrs. Wright, will reply to you and will propose a motion for the council. And the councillors will then debate your petition. So if you're ready, over to you, Mr. Bennison.
Hello. Thank you all for having me here. I did initially write or hint in the petition for the Blackpool Foyer to be opened during the winter, but many members of the public have suggested that the Blackpool Foyer should be open all year round for those in need. Many members of the public have also mentioned that they feel that the Blackpool Foyer should be opened again for a more wider group compared to before. The Blackpool Foyer represents a significant resource for the town. It has 38 self-contained flats which have not been put into full use since October 2014. To many others, it seems Blackpool Foyer was much more than a building that gave young people in need a home. The Blackpool Foyer was also a resource open to training and education to members of the public. For example, a training organisation called Learn Direct, which offered various training courses, used to be based at Blackpool Foyer. Also, Blackpool and the Fylde College had also had heavy links with the Blackpool Foyer, along with many other organisations that helped with use of Blackpool Foyer's resources to the local community. I strongly believe that Blackpool Foyer should be open again because it was purposely built in the late 90s for those in need. I believe that with the Blackpool Foyer reopening, this will reduce the number of people who are homeless. The Blackpool Foyer in the past have helped many young people get back on their feet. I have spoken to at least 100 ex-residents at length, and all of them have said that this building should reopen. Some ex-residents have expressed, although they didn't particularly like the situation they were in at the time, they say that in the long run, Blackpool Foyer has made a positive difference in their lives. Another issue that has been a concern to me over the past year is that while I've been passing by, I have on 4 occasions found I could access the Blackpool Foyer because the door wasn't locked. In fact, the door was broken and couldn't shut. On these 4 occasions, I did report this to Great Places Repairs team. I'm surprised the Blackpool Foyer didn't get used to it being a squatter's paradise, which could lead to significant risk and a huge cost to the building while not in use. It's a little confusing as to what is really going on with Blackpool Foyer, as it seems although Blackpool Housing Company have taken over it, but it also seems that Great Places are still in charge of the repairs. Furthermore, I have just managed to obtain information that the Blackpool Foyer had been acquired by Blackpool Housing Company in March 2016. Therefore, it seems to have been some talks of Blackpool Foyer opening, but over the past 2 years, since Blackpool Housing Company has taken over the building, it's still stood empty. Overall, Blackpool Foyer has been closed for over 3.5 years, and I feel it may be starting to become too long for the building to not being put into full use. Lastly, I'd like to thank all those who helped me with the petition. I'd like to thank all those that also gave me input and advice with this issue.
That's it. Thank you very much and well done. I know even councillors who've spoken for many years in this chamber find it a difficult place to speak in. So thank you for putting it over so clearly to us. Just before I call Councillor Mrs Wright, I don't know about you, but I'm boiling. So gentlemen, please do remove your jackets if you wish. It is rather hot, to say the least. Right. Thank you. Okay. Right, Councillor Mrs Wright, if you'd like to reply and then propose a motion.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'd like to, before I go into great detail, I just firstly would like to propose that the council does not open the foyer building up to the homeless people. And I will go at great lengths to explain the reasons why. You are right to draw attention to the plight of people who are homeless in Blackpool, and especially to those who are rough sleeping. As in many other parts of the country, the number of people found to be rough sleeping has increased in the last few years, following a period of sustained improvement in the 2000s. There also has been significant increase in begging, although only 1/3 of people who are currently begging in Blackpool are homeless. But the reason for rough sleeping in Blackpool are different to many other parts of the country, and the solutions that are required here are different too. Whereas in many parts of the country, rough sleepers and homelessness can be caused by a lack of accommodation available to people on low incomes. In Blackpool, we have lots of accommodation that can be accessed by people relying on benefits, even if the quality is sometimes poor. So rough sleeping and homelessness in Blackpool are not the result of a lack of accommodation. Rough sleeping is primarily the result of entrenched problems in people's lives that cause them to run away, often to other places, or to be stuck in a cycle of finding poor quality accommodation and being evicted. While having an emergency place to stay for a few days may play a role in them getting themselves back on track, the fundamental need is to address the issues that are facing so the cycle can end. This is often a long journey and can have many setbacks, especially when compounded by addiction and mental health problems. The responses to rough sleeping in Blackpool Council and the best local authority agencies seek to address the causes and not just the symptoms. The council will help other local agencies as maintain daily outreach services to identify rough sleepers, quickly and immediately offer them support. In at least half of new cases, rough sleepers are new to Blackpool, and the immediate response is to help them back to their hometown and plug them into support there. Emergency accommodation for a one night at a time is available through Caritas and Street Life. In winter, there is an additional emergency night shelter that is available to everyone in periods of coldest weather, run by local volunteers with support from the council. Temporary accommodation hostels at Gorton Street and Central Drive, owned by the council and managed by Blackpool Coastal Housing, provide accommodation for up to 40 of the most vulnerable homeless households for a month or two until permanent accommodation is found. A new Housing First project is housing and working intensely with the most entrenched rough sleepers. The approach is based on international best practice and finds permanent accommodation of people's choice and nurtures them to a point where they are confident they have activities and social contacts that they need. Addictions and mental health issues can then be addressed. With earlier signs of success, we are hoping to further expand the number of rough sleepers helped in this way. Wider services provided support during the daytime include the bridge at the Salvation Army, Fulfilling Lives, Street Life, Blackpool Food Bank and Blackpool Street Angels, working under the umbrella of Blackpool Homelessness Partnership. But not everyone is willing to address the issues in their lives immediately. The desire to change has to come from the individual, with encouragement and support available as soon as they commit to making positive change. It can take a long time before people get to this point, and as a result of intensive and sustained work, the number of rough sleepers in Blackpool on one night is 13 in the last official count in November 17. It has not risen as quickly as many other places.
Councillor Wright, you've got the red light. Oh, that rhymes.
Right.
Can you finish off quickly now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Madam Mayor.
Whoever I am.
Stop me in my track. The petition asks that the foyer is open to homeless people alongside the existing support, but it would not make sense to open up the building as a big hostel for rough sleepers, because we do not need that amount of additional emergency accommodation in Blackpool, and the foyer would provide the things that people need to move forward in their lives, and in the longer term, the end of the cycle or rough sleeping that
Thank you,
requires
Councillor Wright.
their
Can
own
you?
commitment.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Wright has proposed that we do not take the action requested on this petition. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cross, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. Just to say that I actually used to live in the foyer. I lived there when I was 17 to 18, so I'm more than familiar with the layout of the foyer. And I lived there for a housing and an educational need. When I lived in the foyer, I was expecting support, not just around my housing, but around my education, as the gentleman said. And unfortunately, due to funding cuts at the time, but both in national education and locally, they were unable to fund that. What that meant was the foyer became full of people that had multiple complex needs that were not there just for one or two issues. Unfortunately, that meant that people like me that were living in the foyer at the time were scared to leave their rooms unless they were actually going out of the building. It was surrounded by people that had multiple complex needs and didn't have the wraparound services that they needed at the time that they were in that building. My fear is that we would end up with a similar situation if we reopen the foyer for one evening or 2 evenings for people that were rough sleeping, because as Councillor Wright has said, a lot of the issues surrounding homelessness are actually not about homelessness themselves. There are multiple complex issues surrounding the reasons why people are homeless, and actually unless those wraparound services are there, that would be a wholly inappropriate place for them to be. It's very closely confined. There's not an awful lot of security measures that you can put in place because of the way the building is designed. And actually, if we're going to plough money into something, I think it should be around preventative services. Councillor Wright has listed some of those preventative services, and I think compared to other local authorities, we do have quite a full spectrum of services that will support people that are suffering from homelessness. And I think that's why it's appropriate for me to second that motion not to reopen the foyer in that particular way. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Do we have any other speakers, please? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I ask in the first place, does anyone know why it was closed in 2014, I think? Yep. And also, were we paying the costs for that when it was open? What are the ancillary costs? What would be the ongoing cost of running that? And do you have any sources to make sure the funding would be there, not just to accommodate, as been suggested, but to add to the wraparound services as well, which would be imperative to a scheme like that working? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Williams asks a very, very pertinent question. Members may recall that I was a former support worker and later Deputy Chief Executive of Bay Housing Association, which offered very similar supported accommodation to young people that may otherwise have been homeless. So I do have a reasonable amount of knowledge on the subject. And as Councillor Cross has said, the concept of the foyer, which was one developed by the Manchester Methodist Housing Association in the 80s and early 90s, was to support young people who, for whatever reason, were not able either to remain at home or to flourish at home. Due to lack of funding, due to lack of training, that never really happened. And the foyer principles were not stuck to. And it ended up being a supported accommodation centre, very much like the one that I used to run. Members may also recall that during our budget cuts, when the supported people funding was no longer hypothecated or ring-fenced to provide support to people, over a period of years between 2010 and 2017, this council gradually withdrew its support for supported accommodation units like the Foyer and like Bay Housing Association. I was made redundant as a result of one set of cuts, and the following year Bay Housing Association closed down in its entirety. So it was us, it was the council taxpayer that was funding all of this, either through the Supported People Fund, which no longer fundamentally exists, or via housing benefit. It was always the case that the costs of support were very much higher than the costs of accommodation. Until and unless we are able to identify a very sizable pot of money to provide the type of support that these 38 putative residents would need, it makes, unfortunately, absolutely no sense at all to reopen the building, because the building, frankly, Madam Deputy Mayor, isn't the point. We don't have a huge problem with rough sleepers, people who are not in receipt of housing benefit, who have absolutely nowhere to go. But I can guarantee that if we opened and advertised a 38-bed hostel today, it would be full by tomorrow. If we opened and advertised a 380-bed hostel today, it would be full by next week. This is not something that the council should be encouraging. Instead, we should be carrying on doing what we are doing at the moment, what successive administrations have done, and try to support people to make sure that they don't end up homeless in the first place. But when they do, to support them through the rent bond scheme, through My Blackpool Homes, through BCH, to find secure and stable accommodation. It's a very well meant petition, and I applaud the organisers indeed for having so much care for the people of Blackpool. But I say in all honesty and all good conscience that unfortunately this is not the way to achieve what the people who signed the petition have set out to achieve. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just to follow up on the leader's comments, and I'm not sure if he has a right ability to reply to the question, but Councillor Wright may be able to. Does the council actually have a plan to exploit the building, or do we have a plan just to put it in abeyance until the need for it is found in the future?
Come back on.
No. Yeah, yes, you do have a right to reply at the end when everybody's spoken. At the end, Councillor Wright, when everybody's spoken.
Sorry.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When I first read this here, I was a bit worried that when it was first introduced, I thought it was 18 to 24-year-olds, but I just read here tonight, it's 16 to 24-year-olds. With my, dare I say, experience in my day job, the trials and tribulations and the problems we have with 18 to 24-year-olds are unsurmountable, and they cause more problems than the rest of the age group put together. On this note alone, I couldn't possibly vote for it. However, having said that, we do have a lot of homeless people in Blackpool, and over the past 3 years since I've been a councillor, I have seen a terrible drop in standards with them sleeping in hallways, not just in places like Queen Street, but actually around St John's Square and Central Drive, and all the way through Blackpool. We don't seem to be doing anything for these people. We keep saying we try to do this and we try to do that, but the numbers of homelessness, those sleeping rough, are growing. And instead of working on opening doors, as Councillor Blackburn said, you can make a 308 department flat or building and it will be filled up. But we have to do something with the amount of homeless that are on the streets at this moment in time, because the cost of this town, with the amount of homeless and the beggars, is going to prevent people coming back here. We see them all the time. There's a lady said to me today that she has part of a group called the School of Samba, which is held in First Steps on Dixon Road. And those ladies who get the bus in have to walk from the old Wilco's down to the First Steps. And they're getting that much harassment, they're actually thinking of leaving the group. And so we're going to start losing people just walking down Dixon Road because of the harassment and the aggression of the beggars and the druggies who are harassing them all the way down. That's just one section of Blackpool. So I'd just like to say that the 16 to 24-year-olds is a nightmare scenario, and we couldn't possibly go ahead with it. If we're going to do anything serious with these people, it's got to be all age groups. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Do we have any more councillors? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just had to respond to what Councillor Scott has just said, because he appears to be confusing homeless people with people who are begging. And I think we need to differentiate there. Yeah, I have no doubt there will be other questions from the opposition tonight about that. But these people that you are seeing are not homeless, yeah, and we have proved that time and time again. They are coming in from places like Preston and Manchester and coming to Blackpool to professionally beg. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to eradicate at the moment. We are seeing around about 15 entrenched rough sleepers who are sleeping on the streets of Blackpool every night. And we are doing everything we possibly can to get those people into accommodation. So I think we just need to clarify that Blackpool is not full of homeless people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any more councillors wish to speak on this?
Can't speak again.
I'm sorry, Councillor Scott, you can only speak once on this. It's the usual rules of debate apply. Any further speakers? No? Sorry, I'm having to peer. Like I say, you have to wave. Right, Councillor Wright, if you'd like to reply to it.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Campbell, for defining that for our colleague over the other side. My words I'd written down were homeless and beggars are two different groups, totally different. I just want people to know, because I didn't get to the end of my paperwork, what I'd put together. So to let people know that the foyer isn't currently empty, that a company of guardians actually have been looking after the place for several years. They save the town, they save us having to pay rates on that building, and they actually protect that building from vandalism, from anybody breaking in and doing like what they've done to a church in Councillor Galley's area. So I just wanted to clear that, so it hasn't been empty for that length of time. And also that the housing options team are moving down there on the ground floor, and then the rest of the building will be looked at of what, because they are only tiny bed sits, and our own Blackpool standards of people, it doesn't meet our own standards to that degree. So, I feel, sorry that you're so passionate about it, but there is things that obviously you weren't aware of. So, but our team does work very hard with the homeless ones, and they should be commended for the work that they do. They go out every day. So, thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Wright. So it has been proposed and seconded that we do not take the recommended action on the petition and take no other further action. So we'll take a vote on this. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? I think we're unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Thank you once again, Mr Bennison, for taking the time and trouble to bring that in to us. If you'd like to go now, I don't blame you if you've had enough of us. Please do feel free to go, but feel free to stay if you want to. Right, councillors, we move on to the executive reports. First of all, the Leader of the Council, pages 13 to 34. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I have just noticed there's a typo on this. It says that my report is to be presented by Councillor Gillian Campbell.
Oh, well, all right then.
And, it's been updated on, apparently it has been updated on the system. And I've no intention of making her do that because I'd never hear the end of it. Happy to present my my report, Mr Mayor. There are...
Whoever I am.
Deputy Mayor, my apologies. I'm easily confused.
Yeah.
There are just a couple of items that I wish to draw to members' attention. In the first paragraph, you will see that we are recommending a transfer of £2 million from earmarked reserves into general reserves, which will see our level of working balances once again at £6 million, which is something that I know Councillor Callow in particular is always very pleased to see. The second paragraph, this was written about 10 days ago, and I said I fear it inevitable that other councils are sure to follow. And of course it's happened. Torbay Council, which became a unitary authority at the same time as Blackpool, has a population very similar to Blackpool's, but has not faced anything like the scale of cuts that Blackpool has faced. The elected mayor of Torbay has been to their full council meeting and said that there is no money left after the end of this year and they want to become a district council again and part of Devon County Council. So when we take for granted every year the fact that our officers are able to come up with a budget which makes the level of cuts that we've had to make more than 50% since 2010 under both administrations, we need to bear in mind that what an achievement that is. It's not an achievement any of us wanted. It's not an achievement any of us are particularly proud of. None of us in this chamber came into politics to slash budgets, whatever political party we might be from. But the professionalism of the officers that have supported both administrations in doing what we had to do, thanks to the government's policies, has been extremely effective. And we are seeing other councils fall by the wayside. But we are in comparatively very good financial health. Happy to present the rest of the report, Madam Deputy Mayor, and answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you. Any questions on page 13 or comments? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It was just a follow-up on Councillor Blackburn's comment about the £2 million worth of earmarked reserves moving or being unearmarked. I just wondered what they've been unearmarked from.
Any further questions or comments on page 13? No, page 14. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm relating to the Business Loan Fund. Can I just read some TripAdvisor, I suppose their blogs or whatever you want to call them. Gorgeous home-cooked food in a friendly environment. Nothing is too much trouble and the staff are absolutely lovely. Visited on the 21st of May this year, and when we got off the train at Blackpool, it's a brilliant place and the staff are friendly. Always visit when in Blackpool. Brilliant New Year's Eve night. Friendly, clean, not too expensive. Made to feel welcome. Couldn't have picked a better place. Just had a short break in Blackpool and we were in here every day. Great bar with fantastic quality pub food at great prices. Dean's Hot Pot is highly recommended. Spotlessly clean with efficient and friendly staff who make you feel welcome. Will I go again? You bet I will. Seek this place out on my next Blackpool visit with the family and hope it's the same. Highly recommend. Good food, great pub, nice atmosphere, lovely welcome, This place is first class for service, value for money. It must have the politest, friendly staff and managers around. Staff chat to you, serve with a smile. We will definitely be returning. No, they won't. This is the Imperial pub on Talbot Road, who came to Blackpool, who are doing very, very well. And as you can see by the reviews, and there's about 74 on TripAdvisor, and I think 2 not too good. One's moaning about the hot pot not being as good as it was. Somebody else is moaning about standards dropping. Somebody else moaned about a karaoke. The Imperial pub on Talbot Road, I think it was owned by Thwaites, but I think it was a leasehold from the management. They came to Blackpool Council in 2017, asking for a review of the rates. When the taking started to drop because of the tram works, the council said no. They came back to the council and pleaded and said, look, we're really struggling. We know the tram works are good and things are going to be happening when it's all finished, but at the moment we're struggling. What about a bridging loan? The council said no. 25th this week, they closed the doors and handed the keys in, having gone bankrupt. Just the first, possibly, of others. And we talk about sustaining businesses in the town. It's not just the large businesses that need sustaining. It's the smaller businesses as well. Businesses like the Imperial pub. Somebody like Trevor Eves, I think he's called. I think I might have got his name wrong, and I apologise if I have. He's put his heart and soul into this business, worked extremely hard, came to us for help, and we closed the door on him. And now he's had to close the door on his business. It can't be right. We should have given him some help. We should have seen this was happening. You've seen the reviews, great place. But we said no. And as I said, it's not just about supporting large businesses like the Pleasure Beach, like the Hilton Hotel, like the other large sums of money in 8-figure sum, which is shortly to be loaned out. It's not just about those big businesses. It's about the blood and the bread and butter businesses in Blackpool that will be failing.
Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Strategic issues. I do hope that this does go forward, this central leisure quarter, but in the report it says about replace the loss of car parking. I'd like to ask where the additional car parking is going to be found. And also, it's all well and good having all these grand schemes, which we all welcome, but other places in the town, like Councillor Williams has just touched on one, are withering and dying. There was something on the television last night in the North West News, and it showed Blackpool, and we have got the most empty shops in the whole of the country. 40% of our shops are now empty. And once again, Blackpool is the top of the list that nobody wants it to be there. And it was on the report on the BBC, and we were quite horrified. We've not got to take our eye off the ball because we've got these grand schemes, which we all welcome, but we've got to make sure that the people that are here, that are trying to make a living, are cared for and encouraged and not let them go by the wayside. So it did concern me. What sort of publicity is that? We're wanting people to come to Blackpool, come and have a shopping experience, and they find out off the television that 40% of the shops are empty. So they're not going to come. And surely, if it's on TV, it must be correct. But it does concern me. They've done this survey, and, you know, what are we going to do about it? Because, as I've often stood here and said, it's no good taking your eye off the ball, because this is when you get trouble.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The Central Leisure Quarter scheme and proposal, I just wondered if the council and the council leader could explain if there is a plan to sit alongside that would see finally some regeneration work happening on Central Drive. It's the bit that when you mention to the public of the town, regardless of Conservative or Labour or any political party, everybody who says, yes, please, let's do it. So it's almost the elephant in the room. Is there a plan that would sit alongside that would regenerate that key corridor into Blackpool?
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, the central development area. I saw the press release, so did other people in the media as well. I was quite surprised, actually. It says that and if I've read it wrong, I apologise, that it seems to be that this exclusive agreement has been signed after the leader's 2 trips to Florida, when he knows and I know that the exclusive contract was signed with a company in Manchester and not from Florida. So it's a little bit misleading. And also, the only thing that's coming out of Florida, as far as I'm aware, is a 4D simulator. Nothing else has been actioned or nothing else has been agreed. And I know it's a fluid environment, but this is a big site, and it's going to cost a tremendous amount of money. So I want to know why it is when the BBC phone up, having read the article, can't get a quote from Councillor Blackburn, can't get a quote from Councillor Campbell, can't get a quote from the press office. This is today. And it's why I'm on the politics show on Sunday. Yeah, good. Good. We both are. We can all talk about Funnyland and what it's going to be and what it's not going to be. It's all smoke and mirrors. Let's see some substance. Let's see some substance. This is all. Oh, we can't tell you now because it's a secret. It's commercially sensitive. We can't tell you now. That's why you make decisions behind closed doors, because you really haven't got any idea what's happening. Well, tell us. Why don't you tell people?
Councillors, can we not have a debate
well,
between
in
ourselves
that case,
here?
if that's rubbish, why don't you tell the people of Blackpool? Why is it such a big secret? Commercially confidential. Why is somebody else going to build a car park somewhere in the middle of a promenade and put the same sort of Trafford Park come leisure facility on it? Come clean. If you're doing something, tell people. Don't be vague. You'd think an election was coming up next year. Thank you,
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Anybody else have any questions or comments for page 14? Councillor Galley, was that you waving? Oh, it was, so sorry. And Councillor Peter Callow, I'm so sorry.
Yes, this is Deputy Mayor. People aren't going to come to Blackpool and shop in Blackpool if they go to shops and there's people lying flat out in the doorways, there's people begging, there's people chasing them down the street. I've seen it. I go into town regularly. A lady, an oldish lady, refused to give somebody, an able young chap, some money. So what did he do? He followed all down Temple Street going, "You bastard." So are they going to come to Blackpool and shop in Blackpool? No, they're not. They'll go somewhere more decent than Blackpool, and it's turned under this administration. Thank you, Mrs. Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Lynn Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must live in a different town because I go into Blackpool Town Centre every week nearly. And I don't, of course, being the chair, being the Councillor Claremont, I'm aware of these issues. But it is not as it is being portrayed. I take my children into town, but the children go in by themselves. It is not as it is being portrayed, that you are followed up and down the street and shouted at. That is not the case at all. There is clearly issues. There are clearly issues that need to be resolved, but by trying to over-egg the pudding with an election coming up next year, I think it's really doing discredit to the officers of this council who work so hard to deal with this problem.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. The other one, not you, but thank you as well. Any more questions or comments on page 14? No? We'll move to page 15. Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is, some people on the other side may think this is very unusual for a Conservative to stand up and just say about Usdaw what nice, generous people they are. We went to 1 or 2 functions with them when Peter was the mayor, and they gave us a very generous donation to the mayor's charity. I believe they do this for all the mayors.
They do every year,
we had
yes.
a delightful 2 or 3 days in their company, and I would just like to say I'm very pleased that they're still coming to Blackpool, because these are the sort of conferences that we need and we've got to build on. And it's not politics, it's people coming to the town and finding everything satisfactory and bringing some trade in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any more for page 15? No. Page 16? Page 17? Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you. It's regarding the museum and that we've appointed a freelance curator and an image and copyright researcher. I wondered if the leader could tell us how much the staff budget is and where the money is coming from to pay these good people before the museum is even up and running. And I'd like to know the total cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any general questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I would imagine that most of the members in this chamber tonight share my disappointment that we've lost the Hilton Hotel. Blackpool's only 5-star hotel on the promenade has been sold to the Britannia Group. Britannia Group, very successful, but they cater for a low-end market. They are, how can I say, not in the same class as the Hilton brand whatsoever. If you go to the Metropole, for instance, on the promenade, you'll find hand sanitisers at the reception desk, hand sanitisers before you go into the dining room, and hand sanitisers before you go into the cabaret area. You'll find many of their hotels are in serious need of refurbishment. That Hilton is a big building, and I think we should all be cautious of what Britannia intend to do with that building in the future, especially when it comes to in terms of planning and what other extensions or possibly demolitions they want to make. I'm disappointed we've lost that Hilton brand. I know we have a Hampton by Hilton at the other end, which is a franchise, but it's a shame that we've lost our only 5-star hotel. And I think it's indicative of possibly the economic turn within the town and of the length of visitors' stay and the cost of accommodation, which is getting more and more competitive. Thank you, Madam
Councillor Williams. Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you. Well, this has just come as news to me that Britannia Hotels have taken over the Hilton, because the Britannia Group own the Norbreck, which unfortunately is on Peter and my ward, and they are not good neighbours. We're in a constant battle with them to get them to cut the grass at the rear of their property, and this butts onto bungalows that are owned by elderly people. The grass at the moment is up to the top of the fence, and every year I have a battle with them to get them to cut this grass. I've sent them email after email, and they come up with all sorts of excuses. So I am disappointed. I know it's a popular hotel with people and they do extremely well, but the people who live in the area do not appreciate the way that they conduct themselves on certain issues. And on any other matters, I wondered if the leader could tell us if he's got a little pot of money that he got with commuted sums. I know that many, many years ago, we did some delving and found out that we'd actually got quite a lot of money in commuted sums. And so we spent it then on the highways, and it came in very handy. So I know it's a question out of the blue, Councillor Blackburn, so I'm sorry, but if you could find out how much we've got, and if we could possibly spend it to improve the roads or do something useful in the town. And I had a phone call the other day from a hotelier in Blackpool, because he obviously watches YouTube, and he said, I'm always asking about the Yates's site and it being taken over by Premier Lodges. Well, he said he's seen a list of their future developments, and it goes forward 18 months. They're going to do a development, I believe, in Carlisle, one in Lytham, but Blackpool is not mentioned. And this period covers the next 18 months. So I am concerned about that, because we need some development on there. I know it's not all our fault, but, you know, the people across there have been in power for 7 years, and the Yates is burnt down when we were in power. And it's such a mess in a prime site. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments generally? No. Councillor Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Galley, the £2 million that we have unearmarked, or proposed to unearmark to transfer into working balances, comes predominantly from a contingency that we put aside in case the business loans fund didn't get off the ground at the speed at which we'd intended. You will see in my report that we've lent, or are in the process of lending, almost £100 million. Therefore, it has got off the ground as we hoped, so the need for the contingency isn't there. Steve Thompson regularly looks at the earmarked reserves, and you know, we take a risk-based approach, as you will know as the Chair of Audit Committee, to how likely it is that there will be a need for a call on that fund at this particular time, and we release funds from there as and when it's prudent and appropriate to do so. Councillor Williams, the Imperial Pub on Talbot Road, I don't know the details of the case. Neither Mr Eaves or yourself have contacted me about this. Due diligence is an essential part of the process of granting any sort of financial support to a business. If they've not been able to fulfil their requirements, then we are legally unable to assist them. However, if he wants to contact me, he's free to do so. But if it's too late, it's too late. But we cannot short-circuit the due diligence process around these loans, because if we do, although we have set aside a contingency for failure and for non-repayment, because that's bound to happen, we can't take too much risk because it's public money that we're using. Councillor Mrs Callow, the Central Leisure Quarter, the car parking which is currently on the surface of the site is intended to be replaced with a new multi-storey car park, which will replace all the existing car parking spaces, plus several hundred more for the new attractions that are on that site. Madam Deputy Mayor, on the issue of the empty shops, firstly, we're not at the top of the list on the Centre for Cities report. Although we do feature towards the top of the list, we're not at it. Fundamentally, though, retail is changing, and it's changing dramatically and quickly. People are buying more and more things from the internet. People are buying more and more things from these big out-of-town retail centres, which is one of the reasons that our planning policies have opposed the development of any such centres for many, many years now, because we want to focus retailing on the town centre itself. When we bought the airport and announced that we bought the airport, my mobile phone didn't stop ringing all day from companies who wanted to build shops on the airport site, because it's easy for them and it's cheaper for them. We don't do that sort of thing because we want the retail offer focused in the town centre. That said, we can't just howl at the moon on this and worry about it and hope that it'll go back to being the way it was, because it's simply not going to happen, sadly. We're going to have to think about how we repurpose parts of town centres, not just in Blackpool, but all over the country, because people are not going to stop shopping on the internet, and they're not going to stop going to the Trafford Centre and places like that. We're seeing well-established, high-quality retailers, House of Fraser, British Home Stores, Toys R Us, all going under. We've got Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, and today some Waitrose stores being closed by companies that are in difficulty. It's not a geographically specific thing, Madam Mayor. This is happening anywhere. I've come all the way back from Hull to be here tonight, and I'm going all the way back to Hull because I'm doing some work over there at the moment after this meeting. But as I was watching BBC Yorkshire and Humberside last night, an exact same report over there highlighting the difficulties that retail is facing on the other side of the country. So this isn't something that's specific to Blackpool. It's not that the council has in any way taken their eye off the ball. This is happening everywhere, but we are going to have to think about what we do with our town centres in future. That's going to be about city centre living. That's going to be about more offices and less shops. That's just the way the world is going, I'm afraid. But I share her concern. Nobody wants to see a street in the town centre that's either empty or full of pound shops or full of charity shops. But that, I'm afraid, is the reality. Concentrating business in the Hounds Hill Centre and the exciting new developments there will help, but it's not going to solve the problem for Councillor Galley, Central Leisure Quarter again, yes, I have personally spoken to all of the parties involved in the potential development, and they are well aware of the fact that Central Drive is an issue, and that to just plonk something on that site without doing any works around it simply wouldn't make sense. They're fully aware of that, and we will work with them through a development agreement to try and make sure that that happens. Well, not to try and make sure that happens, it will happen. Councillor Williams asked a really long question about the Central Leisure Quarter, and he told us that there was going to be a 4D simulator in there. He's wrong. He told us that we hadn't done the deal as a consequence of being in Florida and it was a deal with a Manchester-based company. He's wrong. He said that we weren't putting anybody up for interview on this. He's wrong. Councillor Campbell's being interviewed tomorrow. I couldn't do the interview today because I was in Hull and because BBC Politics Show, I think it is, BBC Politics Show, couldn't be here now as I stand here. So Councillor Campbell's seeing them in the morning. But realistically, all she will be able to do is say what's here, because we can't say any more than that, because it is all subject to commercial confidentiality. And, you know, this is the firm that I've met, Alan Cavill and I have met on both of our visits to Florida. So I'm afraid everything else he said just simply isn't true. Well, but I asked, right, after you said this last time, I went and said, who's he talking about? Who's his firm in Manchester? And everybody just sat and scratched their heads. So if you want to tell me, now or privately...
Councillors, are you having a debate without going through the chair again?
Madam Deputy Mayor, you're absolutely right. Please could you tell Councillor Williams that if he wants to... if he wants to tell me who it is, I can find out, right? But nobody knows. Councillor Mrs Callow, yes, thank you for your very kind comments about Usdo. They are marvellous people. They've shown huge amounts of loyalty, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm not quite sure which one of you I'm more scared of, so I don't really know who to look at. Yeah, they've been incredibly loyal to Blackpool, Madam Deputy Mayor. Also, the GNB have agreed to hold their conference here as well. As have the Tourism Society. So it's great to have those signed up now. And if Councillor Mrs Callow is interested in union membership, I can arrange for the forms to be sent. It's a prerequisite for being a Labour councillor, so that may also follow. Who knows? I think so. I think so. But there would be other forms you'd need to fill in, Councillor Williams. We do due diligence on potential candidates. Councillor Mrs Callow asked me about... what did he ask me about?
The budget, the staff budget.
Oh, for the museum. Thank you. I've just written down here... Yeah, I'll come on to that. To deal with your first question about the museum, I've just written down on my notes, no idea. I don't get involved in operational matters, but I'll find out, Madam Deputy Mayor, and let Councillor Mrs Callow and all the rest of the members know. Councillor Williams, Hilton wasn't a 5-star hotel, it was a 4-star. There is a new 5-star hotel, Blackpool's first new 5-star hotel in many decades, in the planning process at the moment at the Sands venue. I have to say I agree with his analysis that if we were picking a hotel partner, with all due respect to Britannia, they probably wouldn't be the people that we pick. Unfortunately, we don't get to pick. Councillor Campbell is seeking a meeting with Britannia to talk to them about what their plans for the site are. The coach company. And
Councillor Williams.
It wasn't me. It's like being in the headmaster's office. So Councillor Campbell will be seeking a meeting with Britannia to discuss their plans for the site and to emphasise to them, Madam Deputy Mayor, how important that and iconic that site is to Blackpool. Councillor Mrs Callow, commuted sums, again, I don't know, but I will find out and let her and everybody else know. I would be surprised if there was a significant sum of money there which neither the Chief Executive nor the Director of Finance had spotted, because they're normally pretty good at finding every little pot of money in every little dark corner, but we'll find out. And if it is there, and you want us to spend all of that money on highways and green open spaces 10 months before an election, I've seen as you've asked me to do that, I will pledge to do that. And we'll credit you in our leaflets. And finally, I'm delighted to say I was sent a photograph the other day by Councillor Campbell. I was sent a photograph of 2 men and a little digger in the former Yates's site. They'd taken the hoarding off and they're in there. And I further discovered, thanks to Councillor Campbell, that Barnfield Construction have now started work on the site to build a 170-bed Premier Inn. So although we bemoan the loss of hotel accommodation in parts of the town, more is being built. Councillor Williams referenced the Hampton by Hilton. Further exciting developments await at Blackpool Pleasure Beach and at the Sands venue and in other areas. So there is progress, but with that there will be disappointments along the way, and that I'm afraid is simply the nature of the business. I think I've answered everybody's question, Madam Deputy Mayor.
I think so, but don't rely on my memory.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. We move on to the report by the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of updates which aren't in my report. Firstly, the Central Selective Licensing Scheme will be going to Executive in July, where hopefully if we do agree it, it will then go to the Secretary of State for approval. Just to give members a flavour, we sent out 12,500 letters to the immediate vicinity and a radius around it, and business owners as well. We did press releases, a dedicated telephone line and an email address for responses. There were 1,340 responses received back, mostly electronic, but some by post, and 75.19% of those that responded said that they supported a new selective licensing scheme being introduced in the central area. 10.89% were against it, and the rest had no clue and no opinion either way. So that's quite a significant amount of people. Quite low in responses, unfortunately, but you can't chase everybody up. So hopefully it'll all go to executive, we will agree it, and we hope if the Secretary of State agrees to it, we'll be able to see that scheme start in the new year. And also just a very, very quick update, hot off the press, where when it has come to switch-on wristbands, we have over 100,000 applicants for, with 4 weeks until the ballot closes, for 20,000 tickets. So there's going to be a lot of disappointed people out there, unfortunately. But I'm just really pleased, because we've done a little bit of announcing who the acts are, we've seen a spike in people actually applying for them. So with that, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. We'll start with page 19. Any questions? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I mentioned earlier a subject that I thought both Conservatives and Labour supporters would unite around. Here's another in this report, and the term that was used in terms of the made a rail timetable of being totally unacceptable. I think everybody in the town of all political groups and support will totally agree with that statement. Now, I know we do have a motion tonight that asks for something to be done about that externally. In the unlikely event, or the likely event, of the Department of Transport saying tough, do we have a plan ourselves to actually deliver the marketing to say actually the emergency timetable is just about working, or is working to the point that you can get here? Because I know a number of elderly people around the country who just aren't coming to Blackpool this year, and they're doing it because they just can't, they don't feel that they have the confidence that they're not going to get stranded somewhere. So by the time we hear from the Department of Transport, we'll have lost this season. So I just wondered if any work will be undertaken to let people know that actually you can get to Piccadilly. There are trains that will get you to Blackpool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. No further questions on that page? Move to page 20. No, page 21. Councillor Clapham. Guess what?
Guess what? No surprise, Mr Deputy Mayor. It's two things really I want to mention on procurement. One is on the Carlton Crematorium temporary cremators. We seem to have had quite a long-term problem with the cremators at Carlton, right from when they were extracting mercury on the health side. Then we had a company who went bust, and it is a specialised area. Do we have a timeline to say when we will finally come to the end of the problems that we've got at Carlton and we'll be up and running on a permanent basis? That was one thing. The second was I was contacted by one of the directors of the sixth form college, of which I am also a director, so I declare an interest. And it was a question about could we connect at the council procurement with young people's education at the sixth form, because obviously employment and their future on that side, apart from education, is crucial. So I said, well, contact Councillor Campbell. This is her area of work, and she's very amenable. Anyway, they came back to me and said, oh, she was wonderful, fantastic, got all the right answers, a fantastic response, and so procurement is going to build into the system the future of young people, jobs, employment and so on as part of the deal. That is extremely good news, because in the pipeline by the government, my government, who don't seem to know what they're doing on this particular topic, are bringing in T-level qualifications, which is instead of BTECs and mixtures of A-levels. And I think it is a topic which is a moving feast. That's why I say I don't think they quite know what they're doing. But it does include a very large percentage of students going into employment in order to get the qualifications. And if they don't get the time necessary within employment, they don't get the qualification, no matter how good they are at the exams. That to me is crazy. But thank you very much, Councillor Campbell, for your response. The sixth form is delighted with you.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. No further questions on page 21? Councillor Williams.
Very short question regarding York Aviation. Just wondered if the report had come through yet. If it hasn't, when are we expecting the report? And will it be made public or will it be commercially confidential? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. If we look, page 22 actually just continues the contract. So I'll ask for questions or comments on page 23 now. Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's regarding Blackpool and the City of Circuses, and that we're one of 6 cities in the UK. I'm absolutely delighted because we have got a purpose-built circus arena there, and it's absolutely unique. But as people in this chamber know, I am a great animal lover, and I'm absolutely delighted that we have no animals at all performing Blackpool Circus. We haven't had for very many years, so I wish them all the best in this, and it's a great honour for us to be in the last 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any further questions? Page 23? Page 24? Page 25? Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you. It's about destination marketing, which I do welcome this, but what really bothers me is that we're going to be doing quite a lot of advertising. We're doing it in Scotland from mid-June, and across the north of England in July and August. I thought we wanted stayers. You know, if we're advertising there, these people are more than welcome, but most of them are just going to come for the day. And what we really, I feel, should be doing is advertising further south so that we get some stayers. All the hoteliers are saying that people are coming to Blackpool and they're very welcome, but they're not staying. So why are we not doing some advertising further south? And why are we concentrating so much on the north of England? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's just about, we've got some great things happening in Blackpool every year. We've done it. We are the entertainment capital of Europe without a shadow of a doubt. And I applaud everyone who gets involved in bringing these attractions to Blackpool. But what we don't seem to be doing is capturing marketing data when these people are in the town. And I'm not sure I've got the answer to how we do that, but there's such an opportunity there for cross-marketing and getting to capture this data, not just with ticket sales from ticket offices, but with actually hand-on with these people when they are visiting Blackpool, giving them information of what else is coming, capturing data. It's all difficult now with GPDR, we know that, but capturing data, emails, etc., etc., etc. That's the way to build future markets in Blackpool and tourism, and that's the way to snowball capitalism involved in tourism. And I would just suggest that we just put our heads together and find some way of doing that. It isn't easy, but we need to do more of it if we can.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. If there's no more on page 25, move on to page 26, with a little bit that goes over on page 27. Councillor Lynn Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It was really just to commend the officers that were involved in Claremont Week of Action. And once again, obviously, Claremont Ward leading the way. But it was our... I was waiting for more than that. Principally our ASB officer, who obviously has a very difficult job. Councillor Taylor and I wish he had less to take up his time, but he works incredibly hard and he instigated this week of action and organised it. And I think it's also kind of in keeping with my comments before in terms of the other officers who work on the front line in EP and housing. They do a very difficult job and dealing with people in crisis and very difficult situations. And it was just really to thank them for all of the extra work that went into that week. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I had two questions on this subject. The first was about the piers, and I just wondered what sort of financial figure we are requiring to restore the piers. And the second was to follow up on Councillor Williams' point about the work that you've been doing in Claremont. In the past, Madam Deputy Mayor, I've always been the first to criticise anyone that I felt hasn't taken the issue of antisocial behaviour seriously. Councillor Williams, Tony Williams would agree with myself that this week in Anxton we've had a number of issues and we've been blown away by the level of support we've had from the police and also the partnership with the council. And it's been amazing, it's been brilliant, and it's been taken so seriously that the work that I know that John Blackledge, who's not here tonight, and his team have done and the reforms they've put in place echo everything that Councillor Williams has just said about what's happening in Claremont. It's something, a partnership, I believe, that is going to be ultimately very successful moving forward and something we can all be very proud of. Thank you, Councillor Galley. No more questions on that? Oh, sorry, yes. Councillor Callow, Maxine Callow.
There are two items, very quickly. The public conveniences. Now, the ones at Little Bispam at the junction with Prince's Way, they've been closed for quite a long time. The scaffolding up, and residents are asking me what exactly is going to happen there. Are they going to be reopened? I can't find out, and I just wondered if I asked a question this evening, if I would get some sort of an answer. And then I do congratulate the Claremont Week of Action and the fact that they're concentrating on antisocial behaviour. And some of this is coming from the social media. I know it's a great tool and it does a lot of good, but it also causes a lot of problems. There's been huge publicity in the Gazette regarding a school where some poor boy has been beaten up and there's been filming it. It was only of the actions of a young girl who stopped it. But this sort of thing is going on. We've got young girls being groomed with this social media. It is just so wicked, and it's so easy for people to get on there and start abusing people, bullying them or whatever. And I do congratulate the Claremont area for trying to clamp down on antisocial behaviour. It is a great problem, and with growing technology, great as it is, and we definitely need it, but it is being abused by some members of Blackpool and wider across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. No further general? No? Yes. Yes, there's no further questions on that page. Yes, general.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just to go back to a point that Councillor Williams and both Councillor Campbell raised, aggressive beggars in Blackpool. I'm pleased and happy that Councillor Williams lets her daughters or her children come into Blackpool. I've got two 14-year-old twin granddaughters. I don't have any control, unfortunately, of telling them where they can go and where they can't go, but their mother does, and she'll not allow them into Blackpool on their own. And as for proof about aggressive beggars, you need to ask one of our members of staff who works in Democratic Services, who was berated from one end of Burley Street to the bottom, almost threatened, quite early in the morning when she was on the way to work. Quite upsetting, quite distraught, and it isn't isolated by any means. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I, and I'm sure everybody else in the chamber, would deplore any sort of attack or aggression or abuse towards any of our staff. Nobody, however, is saying that there isn't a problem. Councillor Campbell and Councillor Williams and various other members have outlined all of the efforts that are going into tackling this. But this is a form of organised crime, Madam Deputy Mayor. These are people, by and large, who are not from Blackpool, who do not live here, but who come here because they perceive there to be rich pickings. This is not a new problem either. This has been the case for quite some time. So nobody is minimising it as an issue. However, what I would say is I will be attending the Local Government Association conference next week, as is Councillor Campbell, as is Councillor Singleton. And that's in Birmingham, where it was last year. And every 10 to 15 yards as we moved about, Councillor Collett was with us as well, every 10 to 15 yards as we moved about, anywhere outside of the conference centre, we were being approached by beggars. They were as aggressive as any that I've ever seen, but it happens to me when I'm in London. This is not a Blackpool-specific issue. These people will go wherever they believe that they can obtain money. The council is doing a great deal, along with the police, to try and tackle this. But let it not... I simply cannot accept the suggestion that it's in any way worse here than it is anywhere else. This is a national issue, Madam Deputy Mayor, but there are great local efforts going on to tackle it. If, however, members opposite have any positive suggestions as to what else we could be doing, then I'm all ears, and I'm sure Councillor Campbell is. But that's not what I've heard thus far. What I've heard is our suggestions that we are in some way minimising it, or that we are in some way failing to tackle it. Not from Councillor Mrs Callow, but from other speakers. And I absolutely reject that premise, Madam Deputy Mayor. And I wonder if Councillor Campbell would agree.
It can be a comment without being a question. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on the leader. We may not be the only place in the country to have beggars, but it doesn't mean to say we've got to tolerate them, does it? And if I could just thank the officers who've been involved in the Little Bispam tram shelter. It's been out of action all winter on the promenade, and particularly elderly people stood there shivering, and it was an atrocious winter. But now we have been promised that it is to be repaired, and it'll be in operation at the beginning of September, and the officers have worked hard on that, and I would just like to publicly thank them. But if I can just turn to flooding, which comes under Councillor Jackson, who has been very helpful on this, I've got to say. but I've had a very heartbreaking email from somebody who lives on my ward who had to vacate their premises, a single mother, just before Christmas, the end of November, because they were flooded. They've only just gone back to their property. Now, can you imagine if she's got 2 little children, they'd be frightened that Father Christmas would perhaps not know where to deliver the presents. You know how children are. I know how my daughter was when she was small. But now that she's thankfully only just moved back into her property, and she vacated it in the middle of November, she then finds that the sandbags that were given to her at the time, which were useless, the 9 sandbags, are still sitting in the back garden. So she got onto the council and was told that she would have to remove them or pay to have them removed. And in the end, she said to me that between herself and her almost 70-year-old father, they'd no choice, but they had to do that themselves. That's a man who's almost 70 and a lady who's had to move 9 sandbags. Now, how many other families are affected like this who haven't got on to their local councillors? The person is very reasonable. She said that she knows it's not the council's fault with the flooding. She knows it's United Utilities' fault. But I think the treatment that she's received from the council, because there were some other issues which Peter and I have managed to resolve, you know, she's had enough and she's struggling along on her own. And I just wanted it to be brought into the public domain that maybe there are more people out there, they've had enough heartbreak, and now they're living in fear that if we get another heavy rainfall next winter, the same thing could happen all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Clapham, did you have your hand up?
Thank you very much. I think it's an omission really from the report. I would have liked to see some recognition for the groups that form Love My Beach. They do an awful lot of good work. They clear up rubbish along the beaches there in Blackpool and other areas, obviously along the coastline. And I would have thought there'd be some connection between the council and these groups, even if it's only thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. Well, I recognise it, and I hope the rest of you do.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Maycock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I would also like to echo the thanks for the groups that do tidy the beach up in Biston. They do a fantastic job. My question is really about the roundabout on the end of Eden Way, which, as we remember, used to have a fantastic sculpture on it, which welcomed people to Blackpool as they turned up. We all know what happened to that, I'm sure. It got destroyed. My question is really, are there any plans to replace it or to do anything with that roundabout? Because I'm sure there was an insurance payout or something like that. I'd say, just are there any plans to replace it? Because it really was a nice feature as you walked it, as you drove into Blackpool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maycock. Councillor Mrs Scott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We've heard about homelessness quite a lot in the meeting tonight, and there is reference to public conveniences in the report. There's also been reference to plenty of accommodation for homeless people. So can something be done to ensure that our public conveniences aren't used as homeless accommodation, as the one in our ward has been on several occasions in the last few months? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Peter Callow.
Madam Deputy Mayor, Councillor Blackburn. Yes, I agree with him. But about Blackpool and visitors coming in and London and what was it, Birmingham and York, right? They don't rely on visitors. We actually do. That's our lifeblood. We haven't got much else, only visitors. And if we don't look after them when they come to the town, then we've had it. We're on the way out. And people are saying that to me now. Blackpool's on its way out. They only have to... No, these aren't all Tories. These are Labour, they recognise it as well. They're waiting for a big store to go and they wonder what's going to happen next. and so do I. We have to look after our visitors. If we don't, they won't come back. Simple as that.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any further general questions or comments? No? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. That was quite a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Quite a big report, yeah. Okay, so Councillor Galley. Yeah, I have met with Northern Rail and Network Rail and very infuriated, disappointed, not only for the people who are trying to get to Blackpool to come and visit us, but for commuters as well. I think it's been absolutely appalling. I'm delighted to see, though, it appears to be settling down a little bit now. We're not getting the cancellations that we had. Just nice to see that the Virgin trains from London have come in. There's been no issues with them whatsoever. We are in discussions with them about digital marketing and making sure that people know that Blackpool is open for business. It might be slightly more difficult to get here at the moment, but that's soon to end. Can I just put on record my thanks to Blackpool Transport? They've been absolutely fantastic through all of this, putting on these buses. I actually done it a couple of times myself. It's quite a relaxing journey. And they've been fabulous. Obviously, we now have the summer timetable in Blackpool for our 18 million visitors that come every year, Councillor Callow. So we can't actually keep it running full time, I think in July. So hopefully it'll all settle down, but rest assured, we are speaking to them about some form of, not compensation, but help to get us reopened as a resort again. Councillor Clapham, procurement. If I can, Councillor Clapham, I might actually pass that on to Councillor Kane, because I have no idea about the temporary cremators, but he loves to talk about them. So I'll leave that with him if that's okay. Really pleased we could help the Sixth Form College. Trevor Rayner is a fantastic officer. I do believe he's been in touch. If we can be of any further help, obviously, if the door's open. The council leader doesn't think that I'm very amenable. Neither did anyone else. So I'd just like to say thank you for that. York Aviation, that's a question you should have really asked the leader. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know, and Councillor Smith isn't here, so I will have to get you a written answer on that one. Councillor Mrs Callow, Circus 250, yes, we've got lots of circus things going on in Blackpool this year. We do have some new illuminations, which will be circus themed, including Ginn Square, which will have carnival horses, etc., glitter balls, all that kind of thing on it. It's going to look absolutely fantastic. But there are other things along the promenade as well. And I do believe there in July, there's a special exhibition at the Grundy that might be worth going to have a look at as well. Really proud that we're a Circus 250 town, obviously. Councillor Mrs Callow again, destination marketing. Yeah, day trippers. We do get a lot of day trippers. Yeah, and we are trying to build that market. And that's what for people to stay. And that's what the resort pass is all about. But just to make it clear that we advertise all over the country. So it's not just Scotland, it's not just the Northwest. We do, it's more digital marketing in some places. A prime example today, I spoke to a Scottish newspaper who are doing a piece for us about Blackpool, and they wanted to speak to me as a Scot who now lives in Blackpool and what we've got to offer. So that is a national newspaper, and that should be running fairly shortly. So I've told them how fantastic the place is, obviously. Councillor Williams, sorry, just to go back to that as well, I did have a brief conversation with one of the officers the other day there about press marketing, and what we're going to try and do is do an open-top illuminate the tram tour along the lights before the lights are switched on, so don't tell anyone, just so they can see what it's like and then go back and write about it. Sorry. Councillor Williams, marketing data. Yeah, we do actually get some marketing data. We get it from the Resort Pass. The Tower gets, Merlin obviously get theirs as well. The Zoo does. The Pleasure Beach doesn't want to share theirs, but I can understand why. So we do capture as much data as we possibly can, but I have been told that you're a marketing man, so if you want to help, you can, you know, give me a shout. Councillor Lynn, Councillor Lynn Williams, yeah, fantastic piece of work in Claremont, and I'd like to thank the officers involved in that as well. It was absolutely amazing. And we are looking at other areas in the town that we can do something like that as well. So those are being planned. Councillor Galley, the piers are in private ownership. So I think it would, and there's no money out there for piers. There are certain things we can bid into, but it's incredibly difficult to go and ask even government, say, for, oh, we need £20 million, can you give us, because they've not got the money either. So we will help the piers in whatever way we can to help them to bid for money. I think they're more looking at the structures that are on the piers at the moment rather than anything structural, if you will. So keep you updated on that. Antisocial behaviour support, I'm glad you appreciate it. Our officers doing a very hard and also fantastic job. Can I just say that you know, when you're saying how fantastic the council's been in supporting you and your antisocial behaviour, you've just written our Anchors Home candidates leaflet. Thanks very much. Councillor and Mrs. Callow, toilets in Little Bispham, did I get that right? Sorry? The toilets in Little Bispham? Yes, just on the junction with Prince's Way. I don't know. I did hear something about someone buying a toilet block in that area and planning to make it into a restaurant. That might be the one, but I will. Right. I wouldn't know, but we can find out for you. And when it comes to social media abuse, yeah, it's terrible. I've got a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old. The 15-year-old is on social media, not signed up to some of the usual platforms. Yes, she is. It's scary. You see a lot of things out there that you don't want anybody to see. And as for filming it, you can only hope that they catch the culprits in the end. Unfortunately, social media is here to stay. So I think it is a case of trying to educate youngsters in their use of it. Councillor Williams, I knew there was going to be something about aggressive beggars. Yes. Just a little update on that for you. So, as you know, we've been doing quite a lot of work over the past 18 months or so, 12, 18 months. 141 individuals have been spoken to. 171 community protection warnings have been issued. 64 community protection notices have been issued. 14 criminal behaviour orders have been issued. 13 further court files are being prepared at present. Some of them will result in criminal behaviour orders. 77 individuals who used to beg in the town centre have ceased their activity and are not seen anymore. 24 persistent individuals are still operating in the town and work is ongoing with them at the moment. I'd just like to echo that everything that Councillor Blackburn said. We are taking this really seriously, but unfortunately when it comes to resource, we're like everybody else. We are struggling. Okay, and I don't tolerate beggars, Mrs. Callow. You know, we don't. We do deal with them. We try and support them, especially if they are genuinely homeless, if they need a hand, but we won't tolerate their behaviour. When it comes to sandbags, that's an operational matter, and I'm disappointed, frankly, that they haven't been picked up, but I will raise that and see if there's any outstanding ones that we need to get taken away. Little Bispham tram shelter. Oh yes, it's being repaired. Yes, that's fantastic. And just as an aside, you said earlier on there that 40% of the shops in Blackpool are empty. I have been reliably informed it's 24, so slightly less than you said. I'll tell them tomorrow. Councillor Clapham, Love My Beach. I think I'm right in saying, I didn't get time, Councillor Clapham, but when we announced the blue flag stuff in my last report, I think we thanked Love My Beach then. Without their support, it would be incredibly hard to get a blue flag in Blackpool. And yeah, I echo your thanks for what they do. Councillor Maycock, Yeadon Way Sculpture, yes, unfortunately we don't have any plans to replace that. It would be just too expensive to put a new sculpture there. We have tried to speak to art groups and see if they would be interested, but unfortunately no one's come back to us. Councillor Mrs Scott, a toilet block in your area being used. If you could pass me on the details, I can have that investigated for you. But when it comes to the toilets that are talked about in my report, there'll be a remodelling of the ones at the coach park on Central Car Park with a turnstile, and you won't be able to just go in to them and hold doors open and things like that. So we're trying to almost like model out the problem, if you will. But if you can pass me on those details, I'll have it looked at for you. Councillor Mr Callow, yes, we are reliant on visitors. And as I said to you earlier on there, we had 18 million visitors last year. We are trying to diversify as much as we possibly can. We do accept the fact that we are a tourist town, but you only have to look at the enterprise zone to realise that we won't rest on our laurels, and we'll continue to do as much as we possibly can to make sure that we're not as reliant on tourism as we always have been. We are Britain's premier seaside resort, and we continue to be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. We move on now to the Cabinet Secretary's report. Councillor Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy, Mrs Deputy Mayor, sorry. I do get Madam Deputy Mayor, sorry, I get it all confused. Couldn't get it right when you were the Mayor. Pleased to present the report and happy to answer whatever questions and comments are raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Questions and comments for page 29. Councillor Peter Callow.
Just like to ask Councillor Kane something. Obviously, he's doing very well in the job. There's improvements in education, which we must all applaud. He mentions 3 schools that are underperforming. Now, he's not going to tell me where they are, and I'm not going to ask. But could he say, are they in a little cluster, or are they spread throughout the town? That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As usual, I'm referring to looked after children. We know it's a problem, we know it's an issue, it's a national issue, and we, socially in Blackpool, suffer more than most. But I have to remind Councillor Kane that he stood in this chamber on many occasions and made firm and solid promises that he would reduce the numbers. Obviously he hasn't. They are growing 540. We will never ever turn our back on a child who needs help. Never, regardless of the cost. But that is an issue. The cost is rising almost monthly in caring for these children. I said in this council many years ago that we should have social workers attached to schools, working with schools to prevent or get early intervention. A former Labour councillor said I was living in cloud cuckoo land. I'm delighted to see and hear from the director of the service that's actually now happening. The other thing the director of services agreed with me, and she has done so when other Labour councillors haven't, is that we need our own facilities in Blackpool. Now, I know money doesn't grow on trees and we can't just find this money to build it, but through prudential borrowing and the fact we're spending more than £20 million a year in outside placements for these children, surely it makes economic sense that we should be building our own facilities. We would ultimately save money and then get to the root cause of why we're so disadvantaged in terms of having so many children in care. As I repeat, we will never ever turn our back on any child or family that needs help. But there is a cost to it, and it's growing. And as I say, the money doesn't come from nowhere. We're going to have to either save this money somehow by being prudent in the way we place them, or build our own facilities so we can accommodate more and possibly take from other areas.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I sit in the Children's Scrutiny, as long as many other members here, if they can get a word in edgeways, as you will know. Councillor Williams has quite rightly pointed out those children in care numbers that are going up. But that number doesn't necessarily tell us anything about our service. It doesn't tell us that we've got one of the best adoption services in the region and that everywhere else in Lancashire looks at us. It doesn't tell us that our relationship with our schools has improved dramatically, and that is leading us to keep children in school and not in care, which is stopping those numbers going up. And it also doesn't reflect that the work that Councillor Kane and Miss Booth, who's recently been appointed, doesn't show us that without their work, those in numbers would be 600, 700, rather than the 500 they are now. They are high. They've been high for as long as I have been a councillor, which is a short time. They've probably been high for as long as Councillor Taylor has been a councillor, who's soon to be the longest serving councillor in the universe, I think. And we know this is a problem, but I think we should place on record, or at least understand the fact that without the work that's going on, those numbers would be much, much higher. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. I'm afraid we'd have to get the stone tablets out to look at the minutes of when Councillor Taylor first joined the council to see if that was the case then. Councillor Danny Scott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Collett said that the numbers don't reflect the work that the department is doing. Well, the problem is the numbers do reflect something is going wrong in Blackpool, because Blackpool's numbers are 3 times the national average. I've said this many times before, and I'm also on scrutiny as well. And I've heard the words from the department stating that they got rid of some staff who weren't quite up to the mark and replaced them with, for want of a better phrase, better staff. And that it was starting to look good and numbers were dropping, and they were overjoyed when it dropped down to 520. And we were promised, literally promised, that it would drop down to the 440s again. A drop of 20% is what we were told. Well, since the 520 came in a few months ago, they're now up to 540. These figures still keep growing, and regardless of the numbers that have been exaggerated by Councillor Collett, going up to 600, etc., we're still far in excess of the rest of the country, and we must be doing something wrong. We cannot have children in this town the worst in the country. We cannot have parents who are the worst in the country, or a combination of both. I don't believe that for one second. I believe it's the way we process it. It needs to be looked at a bit more earnestly and treat these children with the respect they deserve. Are these children being taken from their families too early? I don't know. I'm not involved in the programme. But 540 children from a town of this size is far too many. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The Local Government Association, a cross-party organisation, chaired by a Conservative, in which I am very closely involved, estimates that there is a £2 billion funding gap in children's services alone across 370 local authorities by 2020. At a meeting yesterday, the Chief Executive of the LGA pointed out that if something isn't done by the government in terms of adult social care and children's social care, by 2030, councils would have to increase their council tax by 80%, 80. A referral in this country is made to children's services every 49 seconds. In 2016-17, there were 626,000 referrals to children's social care. A number of the people who've spoken, Madam Deputy Mayor, do not have a professional background in childcare or social work. I happily do. And I can confidently tell the Chamber that every single one of the 540 children who are in our care need to be in our care. Every single one. The amount of work done by Councillor Kane and by our Director of Children's Services, Diane Booth, in the 14 months that she's been with us, have meant that the numbers of children entering the care system have fallen dramatically. Had the previous trajectory continued, we would currently have 620 children in care. They have reversed that trajectory. The issue, Madam Deputy Mayor, is about getting children out of the care system. That takes time and it costs a lot of money. And the people who attend the scrutiny know that, even though they choose not to refer to it in here, because it's a cheap pot shot to take at a very hard-working cabinet member and very hard-working officers. Councillor Scott has absolutely no evidence to support any of what he's just said. I'm almost certain that he knows it's completely untrue, but he keeps peddling the same untruths at every meeting. It's entirely unacceptable, Madam Deputy Mayor. We have a responsibility to these children. We are corporate parents. It's high time that everybody stood up and accepted that responsibility and stopped trying to make political points out of it, because it's disgusting behaviour. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you. Point of order.
Cheap shots to reflect that I don't know what I'm talking about. What I have been quoting...
Hang on, councillors.
Thank you.
What you're saying is not a point of order, Councillor Scott.
That's fine. What I've been quoting, he says I'm a liar. What I've been quoting is what I've been told in the scrutiny meetings by the so-called professionals. I have quoted them. I haven't told a single lie here tonight. I've been at the meetings with Councillor
Thank you. We've got your point of order. Thank you very much, Councillor Scott. What is humming? Has anybody got the microphone turned on? Who was it? Thank you, Councillor. It's still humming slightly. Right, we will move on to page 30. Councillor Maxine Callow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's the Independent Safeguarding Review. Members here will remember that I've raised this issue over and over again following the death of Mr. Oldland. I can mention his name because it's here in the public domain. Somebody who was a war hero who tragically was very badly neglected and died from the injuries he received by being left too close to a fire overnight, and he was unable to move. The poor man died some days later with his injuries. But we have had a review on this, but one or two things just concern me. It says, following a detailed consideration by a multi-agency panel, it was concluded that this case did not meet the serious case review criteria. Well, what does? What does? Do they have to find somebody battered on the floor by some care worker or somebody who sneaked in when somebody wasn't being looked after properly? This does concern me, because as far as I'm concerned, the death that this poor man suffered is absolutely unbearable. It's not worth thinking about, and the distress that it's caused to his very, very supportive and loving family has been absolutely dreadful. I am delighted with the last sentence, which says, in addition, the findings have directly influenced the specification of a new care at home contract ready for retender later this year. I had a meeting with the director a couple of months ago, and these recommendations, there are now 10 new recommendations to hopefully safeguard everybody who's in the care at home system, elderly and vulnerable people. I know when you're dealing with humans that sometimes things do happen, but one of the things with this that was absolutely deplorable was that the carer who was being paid couldn't cope and just left this poor man instead of phoning up their supervisor. I would have thought that it was just common sense to do that. And they've been going to visit this man another carer, so-called carer, and told the relative that they'd had a cup of tea and they'd had toast. And when the carer left and they felt the toaster and the kettle, they were stone cold. And this sort of thing cannot be allowed to continue. These people are at our mercy. But I am delighted, Madam Deputy Mayor, that we've now got 10 solid recommendations that are going to be followed through by the lead team in adult social care, and the tendering process is going to be more difficult at the end of the year, and there is further training for everybody. So let's hope that out of this tragic incident that some good comes out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. It's when I talk, I'm taking offence here. Move on to page 31. Page 32. 33. Sorry, 32, yes, sorry, Councillor Campbell. I'm getting knocked by this thing going.
It's because I'm wearing black. Thank you. Can I just put on record my thanks to everyone who's been involved in the transformation of the old City Learning Centre in Grange Park, now known as At the Grange, which was named by the residents. It's a fantastic area now. It's so transformed, it's unbelievable. We've got a community farm, we've got a community shop. Some councillors came to the launch of it, and they were quite jealous, and they would like one in their ward, so we're looking into that at the moment. But just really, Madam Mayor, just to put on record my thanks for everyone who's been involved so far, and thank you to the support of Councillor Kane as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Move on to page 33. No. And 34. Any general questions or comments? Councillor Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It isn't my mic that's on, by the way. Yeah, I would like to express my thanks and those of Councillor Danny Scott to the officers and Councillor Kane and Mr Blackledge for the work that was done to put the memorial opposite on the promenade for Dennis and Elaine Thwaites, who were very sadly killed in the terrorist attack in Tunisia. There was a small memorial service for family and friends held on Sunday, where Danny and Lindsay Clifford expressed their thanks to the council, and there's been some great work done, and it's a lovely memorial there for that very sad occasion. So thank you very much to everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any further questions or comments? Yes, we're on general. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Deputy Madam Mayor, I'm going to go back to the look after children numbers because I think Councillor Blackburn's statement was absolutely avaricious. I think it was narcissistic and I think it was over the top. If Councillor Blackburn wants to support his cabinet members, I suggest he advises them not to make promises they can't meet, because Councillor Kane had made promises he hasn't met. And as for what I said in the first place, I wasn't criticising. I was saying you hadn't met numbers, which you promised to do so. And I'm sure of the reasons why they're not. What I suggested was that it's costing us an awful lot of money. And by giving the same care differently within our own resources, it surely must be better all round. That was the argument. So to double spin it and say it was a cheap political trick, I think it's disgraceful. Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any further questions or comments? No. Councillor Kane. I'm so sorry, Councillor Kane. It's my eyesight. I'm so sorry, Councillor Danny Scott. Is this a general question or comment?
Comment. Thank you, Madam Chairman, Deputy Chairman. Deputy Mayor, so I got there eventually.
Whoever I am.
Yeah. I don't doubt certain people's qualifications in these chambers. One iota. I've never questioned anybody's qualifications in here. However, when my qualifications are questioned, or questioned, I have to object to it, Madam Deputy Chair. I have worked in the prison service over 40 years. I worked with the homeless. I've worked with the violent, paedophiles, murderers, rapists, the lot of them. And I've put on programme after programme through education, national qualifications. I work with a 12-step substance abuse group for many years, and I have helped in the rehabilitation of, I dare say, a few thousand inmates to gain qualifications and jobs outside. And hopefully many of those have never come back into prison. So for someone to doubt my abilities or care about our fellow human beings, I strongly object to being told so in such a way, in such a political, cheap shot. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. If I've not missed anybody else. Right, Councillor Kane, thank you. So,
Right, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Got it right. What can I say there? There's several questions that have come as a direct report that's covered in the report. I've got to say, I do concur with the comments that Councillor Blackburn has made, that there are certain things that were not, you've no evidence against it. If you'd only listen to what he said at the scrutiny meeting, then you'd understand some of these snipes that the opposition have tried to have. There was opposition leader was on the radio this morning saying that social services were in a mess. Well, you were saying social services are in a mess. Well, I'll tell you what, social services are in a mess. There was reference made to the social services in a mess. There was a reference to social services were in a mess. They were up to standard. No, you did, right? Now, you referred... Hang on. You can have all this debacle all you like, right? You referred to a number of 540.
I did.
Right. You've already had it explained to you that if the trajectory would have been... factual figure 620 if nothing had changed, okay? Listen, right, be professional please and stop shouting over
Can
the
you
table.
both be professional, please? We have a long agenda. It is very, very warm.
It is a point of order. I'm being accused of saying things that I did not say. I have the full transcript of what I said on the radio this morning, and anyone can go on Radio Wave and hear what I said, and it's not what Councillor Kane is saying I said.
Right,
He's not
thank you,
telling the
Councillor
truth.
Williams. I'm sorry, I've got some hands up to speak and they can't. I've taken the point of order from Councillor Williams, but it's back to Councillor Kane now.
There's somebody else indicated.
No, I've said they can't. They can't speak.
Right. Well, let me just refer back to all the issues there regarding the numbers. The numbers would have gone up substantially had we not have changed what the service was doing. If we was carrying on what the service was doing 15 months ago, those numbers would be well in the 600s, and they're not. We have reduced the number of people that are coming in. We have an issue with getting people out because that's the system that works, and we've employed a couple of people to work on the casework so we can then go back to the courts and get those people back into their own homes or into foster care or wherever they need to be for the benefit of the child. We're on a journey of the child, Madam Deputy Mayor, where we're putting the child at the centre of everything we do. There's a lot of work that's involved to get those people out of the care system, and we are putting investment in to get those numbers reduced. When people start quoting numbers, and then there's some absolute claptrap numbers of 200 and something, can I just tell you that I have to look at a budget of 463, not 240, like some of you try and claim that I've said in the past. Never said that number, never. It's budgeted, we look at 463. That's the budget number. That's fact. So don't try and get away with that, because that is the true fact, not numbers that you like to make up on your little abacus. Referring to Councillor Mrs Callow, the independent safeguarding review. The council don't set the criteria. When we take it, the reason with the safeguarding, we have an independent chair to give that independence to the adult safeguarding and to the children's safeguarding. I'm pleased that you're delighted with the recommendations that have come out, and yes, let's hope that some good does come out of that, and I do support what you said on there. So let's hope we make progress on that one, because it was a tragic incident, and hopefully now we can move on. Okay, so there's not an issue with that. Councillor Campbell, what can I say? The Grange. Thanks for your comments. If anybody's not been there, it's a fantastic facility, and you are right, there are other people say, when can I have one of these in my ward? So I think it's a credit, and I want to place on record the credit to everybody involved, because that was working in true partnership with the third sector, the leisure services, the park services. It was a local councillors, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Kirkland, put some of their own ward budget into that. Fantastic facility. I only wish we could replicate it throughout the town. I really do. It's a fantastic. And if anybody wants to hire the rooms, we've got several meeting rooms, so available for hire at a reasonable rate. Just picking up on the comment from Councillor Michelle Scott. I was there on Sunday for the unveiling of the memorial, and I think it's again, this is a credit of true partnership, working together with our leisure services. You've got Danny and Lindsay, and Danny made a tremendous speech on the afternoon, as it was. He's really grateful, working in partnership with the leisure services and park department. They sourced all the stone, they've done all the, and I think that it's a remarkable piece of engineering, really, the way it's been done. And I think that both the two Scots were appreciative, and I've got to put on record that I appreciate the work that was done to get it to the presentation day on Sunday. I know that you spent 3 hours cleaning up, picking all the litter up in the area, but everything that we're getting, the email that we've got is very, very supportive of the council department and councillors. So the family really appreciate it up there. It's I'd say go and have a look at it, because it is. There's a couple of benches there, and it's just working with the family, and we've managed to achieve that. And the sad thing is that yesterday was the 3rd year of that tragic event in Sousse in Tunisia, and our thoughts are still with all the victims and the families that were affected by that tragedy on the beach, when people went there on holiday and a large number of people did not come back, and 26 of them were from Britain. So, but I think the memorial is very good. I'm not going to comment any more on the other items, but it's already been covered, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kane.
I thought you were going to mention the cremators.
Oh yes, Councillor Campbell did say you were more knowledgeable on cremators. Oh, very knowledgeable, I've been told. If you could...
Can I have the privilege of coming back then? I don't want
Yes.
to get somebody saying a point of order that I can't stand
No.
back up and answer the issue.
You may come back and answer it.
Bear in mind, were you on about... sorry, were you asking the question, because I didn't scribble it down, about the time, how long it's going to take to complete? The timescales, yeah, I'll tell you that right away. And, oops, if you make reference to page 32 on my report, and if it was read, and I'll read it. As part of this project, the council will be investing in new cremators in order to deliver the full service now. 2 temporary cremators are already on site and will provide the capacity we need whilst work takes place. And above that, with the main work around the chapel and cremator area taking place in the next 2 years. So over the next 2 years, will do the work that we need to the cemetery and to the crematorium. At the moment there aren't, and as Councillor Blackburn did notice over there, I did catch you from the corner of my eye saying that I like to talk about cremators. I do, and these lot all behind me. No, we have got 2 temporary cremators on site. There is a compound that they're now in outside of the main crematorium building. Over the next few months, there's an application going in to extend the crematorium. When that's done, and we're currently in the process of procurement to get some permanent replacements, and it's all part of the 2-year project, which will see the extension of our cemetery. There's another 7 acres that we're going to take over that will see us for the next 10 to 15 years for burial plots. It's already in the report. I did mention last time the cafe has been redone. Nibbles, who do Anchors Home, I think I'm right, and Nibbles at Anchors Home, Nibbles at the Centre for Independent Living, they're going to go there, and then working with the Bereavement Partnership, they're now going to start offering that as a facility for small wakes. So again, it's using the facilities. There will be a diversion once the work starts. At the moment, the wedding, not wedding, sorry, the funeral. I'll do wedding. Listen. Believe me. Hold on. Believe me. Right. Listen. I can offer you the whole package: wedding, birth, death. I've got it all. I've got the register. Now listen. I know.
Councillors, please. We've still a lot to get through.
Right. You're all having a good laugh here, right? A few months ago, I was literally sent to Coventry by a certain leader to a cemeteries and crematorium seminar, right? And I went there, and there's a presentation of a crematorium that do weddings and funerals. Okay. All they do is just alter the seating arrangement. So it's not beyond
turn
belief.
the altar around.
Yeah, we just turn it around. It's just like just turn the scenery around. Anyway, if anybody wants a tour, when we get, I'll take anybody around there with Jocelyn, because there's a lot of work doing. And can I just say, yeah, you'll go through that door and then that'll be it, yeah. But seriously, there is work coming to, you're right, once I get going on funerals, I can't stop. Seriously, we've met with the Bereavement Partnership and we listened to what they've got to say, and the flower and the flower area and the shelter area, it's all the lighting, it's all suggestions from them. We've taken on board, gone back with them. We came up with a plan of when we start the work, you will be able to go right round the crematorium. There was a plan in place. They made suggestions, we made alterations, and now within 3 days, 2 weeks ago, when the first temporary cremator arrived, we resurfaced the road, so we've done a lot of work up there, and there's a lot of work going on, but it's on a 2-year programme, but hopefully you'll start seeing the benefits. And the idea why we brought these new temporary cremators in is so we can continue the service that we offer, an excellent service. And can I just take this opportunity, Madam Deputy Mayor, to place on record my personal thanks to the people that work there. Over the last few months, they have been working in horrendous conditions, and I think I want to just say a massive thank you to those people and the management through Jocelyn Greenaway and the rest of the team. They've worked really, really well under difficult circumstances, and I'm only pleased that we're giving those staff facilities now that are fit for going forward for the next 5-10 years. But I do want to say a big thank you, because they have been. So I hope that through Mr Towers that can be fed back through the management system.
I'm sure it will be. Thank you, Councillor Kane.
It's a little bit of a bee in my bonnet, but I love talking about it, so I'm thinking about taking it up for after dinner speaking, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, you were raising your hand. Had Councillor Kane omitted to answer a question that you'd asked him? No, well, I'm sorry, you can't speak otherwise at this point, sorry. If it wasn't about that. Thank you.
a question about the schools. I first of all praised Councillor Kane for the improvement in education. But there are 3 schools apparently that are underperforming. Now I don't want to know the names of those schools, but what I want to know, please, if you can, is are they widely spread in the town or are they in a small cluster? That's quite simple, I would have thought. Thank you very much. There's no weddings, funerals or anything to do with it.
Please don't start. I've still got that vision of that altar turning round. Councillor Kane.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had missed it. It was right at the top of my page. They're around the town. They're not particularly in a cluster. But once we get some further information, because we are doing some work on there, particularly with the social workers going into schools and trying to improve it. So hopefully we'll see when we get the results. We are anticipating this time an increase in the results. But we're keeping our fingers crossed, and I'll report the results back when they're in public domain.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Now we will move on after that. Yes, if we can, to item 7, the local transport plan, the implementation plan 2018 to 2021. Councillor Campbell, I believe that's you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, just like to move the recommendations at 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Nothing very controversial about this, but I know it's one of Councillor Galley's passions, so there may be some questions, I'm not sure. But yeah, just like to move it.
Please don't encourage him, Councillor Campbell. Do we have a seconder?
Making old man noises when I'm standing up. Happy to formally second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I couldn't resist such a challenge on transport. All I would say is I believe our group tonight will be voting against this plan, only on the basis for its lack of ambition. There's no mention of a bus station. There's no mention about the aspiration to work with our partner, our shoulder councils in terms of extending the tram line to St Anne's and into Fleetwood. But especially though the lack of ambition about the bus station. What we're seeing in 5.5 is nothing more than a glorified bus stop. So we probably won't be voting for it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any other questions, comments? Excuse me, can you stand up and say? Do you know, I've got a mayoral engagement in the morning with a cinema full of young school children watching Warpham. I think it's going to be more adult than this meeting tonight. If we have no further questions or comments, do you wish to add anything, Councillor Campbell? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, were you so small, Councillor Jackson? Do you know it's catching? I'm doing it now. Sorry,
you,
Councillor
Madam
Jackson.
Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to briefly answer what Councillor Galley said, because you don't necessarily need words in a plan to actually prove that you've got ambition and plans for the future. And that goes on all the time. I attend meetings, Councillor Campbell attends meetings, and Councillor Blackburn, all related to transport in different ways. I sit on the strategic group with people from Blackburn and Preston, and we're always looking at ways to do things in the future. But I think there's a danger when you put something down, if you cannot get the funding and achieve it, somebody on that side is then going to say you made a promise and you didn't do it. So the ambition is there, and we are working on these things, and there's lots of things that we are talking about. They might not be mentioned in there, but we are doing it, and I would assure you that it's all under our care.
If there's no more comments or questions and you didn't want to come back on anything, Councillor Campbell, then we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Move on to item 8. Will you behave? Item 8, the political balance calculations, pages 47 to 55. Can I just point out, since this item was printed for the report, the independent group now wants to be known as the Independent Blackpool Residents Group. Thank you. Councillor Blackburn, you're proposing this, are you? Not the Independent Residents Group, the political balance calculations.
Happy to propose the report, Madam Deputy Mayor, and welcome the formation of the IRA.
Madam Mayor, I am very happy to second that, but not the nomination of the IRA.
Any questions on this? Comments? No, so you don't need to speak again. We'll take a vote on this. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Abstentions? We are unanimous. Thank you. Oh dear. Can we have less giggling over there? Thank you. We now come to item 9, which is 6 notices of motion we've still to get through. So I do not want to cramp anyone's style or stop debate, but can I please ask... Yes, it is very warm. It's warm, etc. Can I ask that we keep questions and comments succinct, please? Succinct? And short as well. No, I don't want to stifle debate at all, but we don't need all the flowery additions tonight. At this time, it's got late. So, first of all, we have the Lancashire Combined Fire and Authority. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is actually a joint motion, probably a triple motion between myself, Councillor Jackson and Councillor Blackburn. We are now colleagues on this. The Lancashire Combined Fire and Rescue Authority, as you can read in this small report, are very concerned that the Police and Crime Commissioner wishes to, in short, take over the Lancashire Fire Authority. It's something that every single member on that board, from both sides and the independent side as well, both sides of the political chain, are against. The Combined Fire Authority works extremely well. It's very efficient. It manages its finances excellently. It is a very, very professional and very open-minded towards blue light working partnership, but it works best on its own. And we think that if it's swallowed up within the the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, it will be that swallowed up. I think budgets will be joined, reused, reutilised, and the people who enjoy the services of fire and rescue, and there are hundreds within Lancashire, will not see the best of service if this happens. So we're very much against it. It's a motion that's going through several of the local Lancashire councils, and I'm just hoping tonight all members will support it. Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I believe you're seconding this, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, I'm very pleased to second this. I think you've got to go back a few years, actually, to understand what's behind this. The introduction of the Police and Crime Commissioner was in 2012, and there's been increasing pressure from that date by the central government to make sure that the fire authorities were taken over by the police commissioners. And that's one of the things that's pushing this process forward. And it would appear that the current Police and Crime Commissioner is willing to go along that route, although everybody locally is against it. And as Councillor Williams has said, it is absolutely unanimous at the Fire Authority. Every single member, when the vote was taken, voted against this happening. And one of the main things that the pretend, and that's, I believe is correct, will happen is it will help with the collaboration between the fire service, the police and the ambulance. That is already happening, and it's happening very, very successfully. We have one of the most outstanding fire authorities in the country, and we're being inspected later in July, and I'm sure that inspection will again prove very fruitful for us in the admiration that we have for the fire authority. And the collaboration we do is fantastic. It isn't just a fire brigade, it's a fire and rescue. And the firemen do a lot of work which is not connected with fires at all. And they're very much involved in road safety accidents. I happen to be privileged to be the road safety champion on the fire authority, and I see at first hand the collaboration between the three groups, the ambulance, the fire and the police, how they work together. Yes, there's always room for improvement, but I think that collaboration is absolutely excellent at the moment, and it's a red herring to suggest that we need to be taken over by the PCC in order to do that. Can I just mention that today I've received an email from Dave Green, who is the FBU National Officer, and that states quite clearly that the union's opposition to people elected to run the police service taking over the fire service. So it is not just the councillors, it's the people who do the job, the FBU workers and the union are against this as well. One of the things that worries me is that if this is about saving money, the possible cuts are going to be in the fire service. We have 3 very good fire stations in Blackpool, and I do not want to see one of those being lost because of this takeover by the PCC. So I do ask everybody to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bearing in mind your desire to keep the meeting short, I will simply support everything that Councillor Williams and Councillor Jackson have said, and tell the Chamber that I have yet to meet anybody apart from the Police and Crime Commissioner who thinks that this is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Anybody else? No? We'll move it to the vote then, unless you want to come back at all. But not at all. I don't think you need to plead any more by the look of it, Councillor Williams. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Against? Abstentions? We are unanimous, thank you. The second motion on learning disabilities, Councillor Collett to propose.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Last week was Learning Disability Awareness Week, and here in Blackpool we have a thriving community of people with learning disabilities. We've got our gold medalist swimmers, we've got Nibbles Cafe and soon to be Nibbles 2 at the crematorium, we've got our Langdale volunteers, and many other groups that play a vital role in our community and in our town. And we've also got all the support services that go with them. So we've got some astounding special needs schools, we've got the Independent Learning Centre, and we've got all the groups and the staff and the volunteers that help support these people. And all of this just goes to show what well-supported people with any kind of disability can achieve as long as the support is there. But Madam Mayor, it's unfortunately that people don't get the same service of support when it comes to healthcare and hospitals. The statistics are stark. Around 1 in 10 people with learning disabilities admitted to hospital will die. And unfortunately, over the last 10 years, over the last decade, this has been examined, and the same themes come through. Many of these deaths could be avoidable if people were given the correct support and they were given what is called they're given the right allowances, so extra time allowances with their GP, or specialist services to allow people to make the correct decisions in a more better environment or a manner that suits them. And nothing has been changed in the last 10 years. Unfortunately, there is no obligation at all to train health staff, nurses, doctors, even porters, x-ray staff. Hospitals don't have to train anybody in learning disabilities. It doesn't matter how good your service is in hospital, they are for your learning disabilities. If nobody knows about them, if nobody is able to access them, it doesn't matter how good they are. And people are possibly dying because they are not getting the services they need. That is something that needs to change. Just basic mandatory training for all hospital staff would make a huge difference. There was a report called the Leader Report, and MENCAP have currently got a campaign that said just that alone would make such a massive difference to the mortality rates of people with learning disabilities. And it's not currently a legal obligation. That needs to change, Madam Mayor. But that also offers up greater themes. Specialist services. There is no obligation for hospitals to even have specialist services for learning disabilities. We have them here in Blackpool, but there is data to show that nobody actually knows throughout the country who has specialist nurses, who has specialist doctors. Those records are not kept by NHS England or the Secretary of Health and Social Care. That needs to be reviewed. There needs to be a greater push to get people into these positions. Universities all over the country are closing down their specialist nursing degree courses, closing down access to specialist doctors, because we just can't recruit. There is no interest, but that's because it's not on anybody's agenda. People don't realise that this is actually a specialist subject. These are specialist routes, and we just don't do enough to promote it. But also then from that, there is no national way of identifying people with learning disabilities in the NHS. Some local hospitals will have their own, but there is no universal way of recognising, which means there is no universal way of following people with learning disabilities through any kind of system. There is no way of allowing these people then to have the measures put in place that would allow them to then make the hard decisions, give them extra time, allow them to access information that is easy for them to understand. That needs to be reviewed, Madam Mayor, and it needs change. And more importantly, there is no voice for anybody with learning disabilities in the government. There is nobody, especially with an interest in health. When it comes to finance and getting people with learning disabilities back into work, there's a few different ministers that have this role, but there is not anyone in health. Jeremy Hunt is currently the person with that responsibility, as well as everything else. These people don't have a voice. People with learning disabilities often don't have a voice in their day-to-day. They don't have a voice in government, and that also needs to change. Madam Mayor, I hope everybody can support this, because it will make a huge difference. Just small allowances, things that don't necessarily cost much money, would make a huge difference to the mortality of people with learning disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. Do we have a seconder for the motion?
Formally second it, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any speakers on this? Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can agree wholeheartedly with some of the sentiments you make, Councillor, but it is such a complex subject. And I don't want people walking around with badges saying, you know, I have learning difficulties. And it ranges from being dyslexic all the way up to total mental impairment. I'd like to see how that's going to work. I'll support your motion. I'd like to see how that's going to work and how you can measure and train the different levels of recognition needed to do this. I'm sure there are systems in place that will do it, but it is a very complex subject. And I also welcome the idea of a minister with special responsibility for learning disabilities, providing that comes with that the repair system as well, and the educational system, and the care system. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm pleased that Councillor Williams and hopefully the rest of his colleagues are going to support this motion. I think it's a very valuable statement of intent from this local authority. And if I might just add, in terms of giving people with learning disabilities additional support in order that they may be able to achieve what they want and need to achieve, myself and Alan Cavill attended the Council's Project Search graduation ceremony a couple of weeks ago. And every year we get anywhere between 7 and 12 young people in Blackpool with learning disabilities into work by working with them for 12 months. I would just urge all colleagues who are interested in this and would like to know more about it to find out, to ask questions, come and see me, talk to our officers, because it is without a shadow of a doubt one of the best things that we do. We know that in Blackpool only 8% of people with a learning disability are actually economically active and in work, so 92% aren't. The vast majority of these people are not only capable of work, but they want to work. So this is exactly the same idea, but in health it's about giving people the additional tools which they need to stay safe and to stay healthy and to access the sort of medical treatment that all of us are able to take for granted, because we're able to go into the doctors and tell them exactly what's wrong. If we don't think we're getting a decent service, we know how to complain. People with learning disabilities simply aren't enabled at the moment to do this, and that's what this motion will do. And I'm very grateful for all the support.
Thank you, Councillor Blackman. Councillor Maycock.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Collins for bringing this to the table and actually recognising it as a problem. It is an issue that I have with my own personal family. I have a sister who has got a mental disability, and it is an issue when you go to hospital. She has all wraparound care outside of the hospital, but once she gets in there, it is a problem. And to answer Councillor Williams' question, a lot of the things are often necessary is simply time. Somebody to stand there and actually listen to that person with disability who will then try and explain what the problem is. But a lot of these days the doctor surgeries are rushed, there's time limits on everything, and there just isn't the care there to enable that to happen. So I'd like to thank him for bringing this to the table, and I fully support his motion.
Thank you, Councillor Maycock. Any more speakers? We'll go to the vote then. And oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Collett, did you want to come back on that? No. Sorry about that. Right. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Once again, we are unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Well, next motion is the reinstatement of through trains. Councillor O'Hara to propose.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This I hope, is a straightforward one. It seems that the present railway system is that tourist destinations are second thoughts. If you look at all the furore there's been over Windermere just recently. This service is a service that is used by a very large number of our visitors every year, and also by quite a few of the residents who have relatives who live in Leeds, Halifax, Blackburn, Burnley. And it's fairly straightforward. I mean, Councillor Galley spoke about ambition. The ambition ought to be to make this service a pristine one, electrified, but obviously that's a long way in the future. But I think we must be asking for through trains to go back from Blackpool North and Blackpool South to East Lancashire and West Yorkshire, because I've watched families on Blackpool North Station after they've bought all the teddy bears and the fancy things that they've got on the prom, struggling down Blackpool North platform, getting on the train. If they're to do that again at Preston, they're going to say, well, what is, you know, that wasn't a good holiday. And I've also seen elderly people and disabled people struggling to get on the train because the facilities aren't as good as they should be. And if they're to do that again at Preston, it's going to be a major problem. So I would ask everybody to support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you very much. Proud to support this motion as it entrenches the principle that Blackpool is treated as a vital part of the mobility transport network of the 21st century. You know, it's 150 years that people have been coming from East Lancashire and Yorkshire to Blackpool. It's been the mainstay of inbound tourism. They've contributed in a major way to Blackpool's economy and have benefited from a recreational experience they couldn't find elsewhere. The railway has formed the backbone of that experience. If we could afford a vital railway experience in the 1870s, 1900s, throughout two world wars, during and after the Industrial Revolution, then surely we can enable an integrated train network in the 21st century. You know, Transport for the North has envisioned something called the Northern Powerhouse Rail. ensure Blackpool is included on that physically and in spirit. We must ensure that the tourist base of the North West is never neglected. We must fight to ensure that ourselves, our children and children's children are principal citizens of the North West. And a minimum, we have to ensure direct rail services are run between Blackpool and East Lancashire and Yorkshire.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Any further speakers? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Happy and very keen to support Councillor Hara's motion. I took an evidence-based approach to this, and I looked at a railway timetable from 40 years ago in 1978, but it actually really does back up everything Councillor Hara has just said, because at that point we had direct trains coming from Sheffield, Leicester, Newcastle, Birmingham, Crewe, amongst many others. When you look at then the following decline over the next 40 years of visitors from each of those places, it's quite succinct. So I'm happy to support the motion. There's a huge amount of evidence that backs up why those services should be restored as direct links, and the sooner the better.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Clapham.
Thank you very much. I must declare an interest in this actually, because I was a very frequent traveller from Blackpool north to York and back. A good day trip, 3 hours each way. One train, get on at this end, out the other end, fantastic. The rolling stock was awful. There was no restaurant facilities or anything else, but the destinations at both ends make it worthwhile. You're absolutely right. It should be a straight-through service. It goes right through the heart of Lancashire and Yorkshire, and it brings them into the town as well as takes them away. It should be reinstated as soon as possible, and then I can have a few day trips.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Any further speakers? Do you wish to come back on that, Councillor O'Hara? Thank you. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Against? Abstain? Once again, we are unanimous. Thank you, councillors. It's motion. The next motion, 9D, the single-use plastics. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to propose a motion, because I like doing it, that we could have a plastic-free coastline, support the great work of the Surfers Against Sewage, and definitely commit Blackpool Council and all the businesses that work with it, try and get a plastic-free council and businesses by 2020. And if we could just support that, that would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Critchley.
Yes, I'd like to second Alistair, Councillor Humphreys' single-use plastic removal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I wasn't sure this was actually a motion, Councillor Humphreys, but I agree with your sentiment. I think the council probably already have signed up to being a responsible council in terms of conservation, in terms of the use of plastics. But to be totally plastic-free by 2020, I think, is a big ask. You know, it's down to... It's a huge ask. I mean, wouldn't we love it? Wouldn't it be great if that would happen? But unfortunately, it's down to the manufacturer of various items that we use that, yes, exactly, would probably negate that. As much as we'd like to do it, I think that our hands will be tied in several areas to stop us from doing it. We'd have to throw out our computers, you know, single-use plastic, whatever. But certainly support your motion and support the idea of it, but I'm not sure exactly what the council is supposed to do to respond to you. We're not writing to anyone. Are we making a declaration of being non-plastic friendly? Or
at the end of the speakers, Councillor Humphreys can answer that.
Thank you, Madam
when he speaks after. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Galley. Why are you waving your plastic cup, Councillor Galley? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just to clarify for Councillor Williams, we're not talking about computers. We're talking about straws, plastic cups, plastic stirrers. Part of the issue is actually, it's to do with the manufacturer rather than, you know, us as a council. So it's about using procurement to make sure that, you know, we are asking to see what they can do. I actually have had the one of the scrutiny reports. I do believe there are members taking part in the scrutiny report.
Yes.
And the scrutiny of this. And I think David Attenborough has been banging on about this for years, and we're finally listening, and we've got a bit of a captive audience now. And I think it's our responsibility as a council to try and do as much as we possibly can to try and eradicate plastic. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any further speakers? Councillor Danny Scott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, there is a committee at the moment in the council, single-use plastics, as probably most of us know, if not all of us. But I think that we should be setting the example. I think in a couple of weeks' time we shouldn't see these in the council. All staff should be informed that they will have to bring their own cups in if they want drinking water, tea or whatever. We should be setting the example to take a step forward and show the rest of Blackpool the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any further speakers? Councillor Humphreys, you're right to reply.
I'd just like to say that actually that was an attempt at brevity, so if the motion was lost slightly, that was just because I was trying to be short and quick so that we could all leave. So my apologies for that.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? Abstentions? Once again, we are unanimous. Wow. Move on to 9E, the Save Creative Arts GCSE subjects in Blackpool. And it's Councillor Luke Taylor to propose.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayoress. Since the announcement of the English Baccalaureate, Blackpool High Schools are having to prioritise subjects within the EBAC, as the government have said schools' performance will be measured on the success rates of pupils starting these qualifications. The government expects 90% of all high school pupils to be choosing this combination by 2025. Subjects within the new qualification are English language and literature, maths, the sciences, geography and history, and a language. This does not leave much room for creative subjects such as art, drama, dance or music. Couple the increased emphasis on core academic subjects with the biggest real-term fall in high school spending per pupil for 30 years, equating to over £1.3 million or £185,000 per school of our 7 high schools. It may be no surprise that Blackpool schools are focusing school funding on EBAC subjects whilst cutting back resources for creative subjects. This is a great cause of concern for a town which is known for producing and influencing such creative talents as Lucy Fallon of Coronation Street, who recently won a SOAP award, Adrian Pritchard, who was recently exhibited in the Grundy across the road, Jodie Prenger, who has starred in many musicals in the West End, and if we go further back, Graham Nash of the Hollies, Geoffrey Hammond of Jethro Tull, the Nolan sisters, and if we go back further still, Tony Williams of Steelers Wheels.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, and Jethro Tull.
Of course, there are many others as well that we haven't got time to mention because we're all a bit warm. Through my work into looking into this issue, I have met with representatives from the Arts Council, the Blackpool Music Service, Blackpool's Children's Services, the Grundy Art Gallery, the Grand Theatre, council officers, school teachers and the Member of Parliament for Blackpool South. I also know that the MP for Blackpool North has raised this issue recently in his local newsletter, something I hope of which he will follow up with his colleagues in Parliament. Everybody is on the same page. We need creative arts in Blackpool and in our national curriculum. I am sure there will be similar motions raised across other councils. In Blackpool's primary school, 100% of children are receiving music teaching in the classroom, and parents are supporting this by paying for lessons, travel and attendance at concerts. Figures suggest that 41% of children receiving music education at high school will choose to carry on, primary school will choose to carry on at high school, and here lies the issue. Of our 7 high schools, 2 are struggling to find resource to provide GCSE music at the next academic year. If schools are forced to cut creative arts subjects at GCSE level, then the teachers are not likely to be in place throughout the whole of high school, meaning pupils will not have the opportunity of studying creative arts-based subjects throughout the whole of high school. All of our high schools are academies, and the council do not have a direct input. However, I would like this council to agree today to do all it can to support academies in providing a successful creative arts offering. An arts subject, I believe, would greatly complement the EBAC qualification, with the creative industry booming and companies looking for more and more creative people. Steve Jobs of Apple said, Apple's success was due to the hiring of artists and musicians fascinated by technology rather than computer geeks. A leading professor at UCLA stated that his research demonstrates that involvement in the arts, especially for students from low-income backgrounds, is associated with higher levels of attainment in both high school and university. The professor also noted that studying the arts can have other positive benefits, such as greater involvement in community service. Everybody in the chamber knows about the challenges we face when our children go from primary school to high school, and if our children are not offered the opportunity to continue in their education of creative arts alongside an EBAC, then this could cause damage to our efforts. We should be using our children's love for creative arts to close the gap between primary and high school. Therefore, I'd like to ask the council to support our teachers and parents who want our youngsters to study arts in high schools, that further work be carried out with high schools and the council looking at ways to work together to ensure Blackpool's creative talent is not lost at high school, providing a dedicated resource looking at funding opportunities and ways to support creative subjects at GCSE level, assess the feasibility of an arts-based high school in Blackpool, and finally ask the Chief Executive to write to the Secretary of State for Education on the Council's behalf to ask if high school students can choose a creative subject as part of the EBAC.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. You have a seconder, please.
Formally second, pardon me, Mrs Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
This week.
Do we have any speakers? Councillor Clapham.
Thank you. Those of us that are in education, and parents and so on, do realise that our schools are there to provide a wide, full education, not just the academic core subjects. That's one thing that you can measure children for, how well they attain GCSEs and so on. We all know about that. But the all-round child is really what you want at the end of the day. Whatever talents the child has needs to be nourished, and the arts side, the music side and so on is crucially important. Some children don't show any academic ability whatsoever, but go to the fringe subjects and they are brilliant. And Blackpool is brilliant at producing these children. Once the teacher can tap into that talent or that interest that they've got, then you've got that child. They will go forward, they will blossom and be a credit to the parents and the town. You've got my full support, Luke. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Williams.
Madam Deputy Mayor, you only mentioned my name, so I'd vote. That's the only reason why. But well said. But can I just say, you've missed a few out. Yeah. Ian Anderson himself. John... Sorry, no. It's Ian Hunter. Ian Hunter, Mott the Hoople. I wrote them down. Is it Clive Bell from Pet Shop Boys? Lemmy from Motorhead? Trevor Horn from Art of Noise? And Buggles, of course. Ian Levine, who's produced countless of hit records for the Motown stars. And John Evans from Jethro Tull as well. I don't need to declare an interest in this because he's not in this borough. But I'm chair of the Resources and Resilience Committee for Warrington and Halton Music Services. And I endorse everything you say in this, as do the music service. One of the problems in relation to music is that lots of music services provide instruments free for children in primary schools, but not necessarily to those in secondary schools. And that's the bridge at the moment that isn't being crossed. It happens in some areas, but not all areas. I'm not sure what Andy does here in Blackpool, but once the supply of instruments change, that's not carried over into secondary school, which is a great shame. And quite often secondary schools are set in their ways about curriculum and don't want to adapt or be flexible in terms of music and the other arts. It's a step change, But it's a step change that we have to do, I think, because you're absolutely right, and so's my colleague Don Clapham here. you get kids on the fringe and you'd be amazed at what they can do. I've seen young children at 5 start to learn to play the flute, and at grade 5 and grade 6 by the time they're in. And without that opportunity, they wouldn't have had that. One of them actually plays in the Manchester Philharmonic at 13, which is quite incredible. So, just relating to the music side of it, fully endorse it, fully support it. I just wish we could practically make that move.
I can see a hand over there. Thank you. Councillor Scott. I could see it before, I wasn't sure who it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. I agree mostly wholehearted with Councillor Taylor. It may be a bit restrictive because of the subjects that they have to take. And I do believe in the addition of other subjects. But the problem is they keep talking about art and music. What they don't talk about is the future sporting heroes of our country. Where do they start training? Where do we make room for those at schools that teach them how to run, how to jump, how to pole vault, and all the athletics and boxing abilities that we need around the country to make gold medalists? Where do they come from? And we need not just to teach them music and art, but we need to expand on the more health and fitness side and athletics. That was just my opinion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and we do of course support this excellent motion about broadening children's education in Blackpool, but also supporting the musical stars of tomorrow. And in an attempt to do that still further, Councillor Williams and I do actually talk to each other when we're not in this chamber, and we had a chat earlier on this week, because it turns out that a lot of the musicians I like and follow and go and see in concert, Councillor Williams actually knows. So we briefly discussed this. And I then discovered something that I never knew before, that Councillor Williams has got his own Wikipedia page. Yeah? Which is something I've always coveted, but never had, because I'm not important enough, but Councillor Williams has got one. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And towards the end, after being contacted by iTunes and KTEL Records in California, and following negotiations, Williams reformed Steelers Wheels in Blackpool with 2 other original band members. On 10th of November 2008, they started filming a music video for a re-release of Stuck in the Middle on the Fylde Coast. They also began writing for a new album, although they have no plans to go on tour. Well, on the basis that we want people from Blackpool to be more involved in music and the arts, I've had a word with the Labour group, Madam Deputy Mayor, and we are prepared to seed fund an 11-month tour for Councillor Williams to end just after the local elections next year. So if we can just make that slight amendment to the motion, I'm sure everybody will agree with it.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Are there any further speakers? No. Put it to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? Oh my goodness me. We are unanimous again. Can we make it a full house with the last motion? We'll move on 9F. The rail network and its impact on Blackpool's economy. Councillor Collett, it's you again.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. It's like scrutiny, I'm back again.
Yeah.
Never stop. How long can I draw this out for? I'll keep it short, Madam Mayor. We're a seasonal town. We operate on tourism, and our rail network is in chaos, and that is not our fault. We will have to spend as a town quite a bit of money to republicise ourselves, to tell people how to get here, to tell people we are open, not only as a council and our tourism side, but so will our businesses. They need to keep telling people that they are open and that they can get their business out. We have been hit, I think the statistic is something like 15% Our economic growth is down this year, which is statistically about the same amount of visitors less that have come to the town this year. So it's directly proportional. Luckily, Councillor Campbell has already alluded to that we are in talks with National Network Rail and Northern about how we are going to do that and what our strategy to publicise is. But I think this motion makes it absolutely clear that this money should be coming from them rather than our pocket. This is a situation that we're in that is not anything that we've done, and it's not of our control. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. Do we have a second? Councillor Hutton.
Deputy Mayor. I'm hoping that we can actually get a complete unanimous agreement tonight, because I think this goes a long way to support the businesses that we've all been talking about over the last few months and trying to support them in every way that we can. We have seen, and it's been reported, and I'm sure everybody's heard it, that there's been a significant reduction in the number of people coming into Blackpool. It's already been mentioned that it's 15%. That's had an impact on our businesses, and I think that this goes some way to support those businesses, whether they be small or large, in actually doing something for them. And I hope that we can have a unanimous decision on this one this evening. Thank you.
Oh, I might faint if we're unanimous on them all. Any speakers? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Strange enough, yes, we do agree with this, but there are caveats. I think we can't change it. Now, I wouldn't want to make an amendment. I don't know how we're going to distribute any financial help that they want to come into Blackpool. It's going to be an extremely difficult thing to do. You're going to get a street shop at the edge of the border somewhere saying my trade's been damaged. But I also don't think we can blame all of the rail for the problems. We all know the town is going through a huge development situation. There are certain reasons why people don't come to Blackpool. Certainly this has been chaotic, without a shadow of a doubt. I just wonder, as chairman of the Transport Board in the North, what the leader's already put forward for this. And if we're to mirror, yeah, by all means, if we are to mirror that, what the reaction has been from his proposals and what's been said. But as I say, I think compensation is good. I think it's right, but I think it has to come into us. And I think we then have to look at how we spend it to support the businesses, rather than set up a fund where businesses can apply for it. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other speakers? Councillor Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I regret to inform Councillor Williams that Sir John Cridland is the chairman of Transport for the North, not me. Yeah, no, I'm a director of Transport for the North, but I'm not its chair. Since I've been appointed, there have been 2 board meetings, and I've had to telephone into them because I couldn't get a train. You know, this is the ridiculousness of the situation. I know Councillor Jackson, who substitutes for me on all of the other bodies that are associated with Transport for the North, has had to do so on many occasions as well. So there is a deep, deep irony in that. My experience of the meetings thus far is that they tend to be a bit of a dust-up between the Secretary of State, Chris Grayling, and the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. And there's quite a lot of to and fro in between the two. However, I, and also the leader of South Lakes District Council, which, I mean, has effectively been cut off from the railway network, as we have, and that it's a key time in their tourist calendar as well. We've both made the point that businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses who aren't able to cushion the impacts of this, have been hit very, very hard indeed. And that I have made the point, as has he, that a compensation, 2 things should happen. One, there should be a compensation scheme. I can't tell Councillor Williams how it would work because I don't know. He's right, it's very difficult. But what we do know from speaking to the people who we speak to as part of our monitoring of tourism numbers is that, roughly speaking, the number of people that come to Blackpool on the train are missing from this year's stats. Now, I accept that there are lots of other factors. However, when we look at tourism trends and visitor economy performance indicators in Blackpool over the past 10 to 15 years, we know that when Easter is at a certain time of year, it has X impact. When it's sunny, it has Y impact. When there is a new ride at the pleasure beach, it has Z impact. And everything would be suggesting that we ought to be up this year, but we're not. And it would appear that there is a correlation between the two. So A, there needs to be a compensation scheme, but B, there does need to be help for us to market the fact that Blackpool is still open and people should come here, because I'm worried that people now are deciding where they're going during October half term. And if you go on the National Rail app, you get a little asterisk next to any train to Blackpool that basically says, and I'm paraphrasing here, might turn up, might not. And that is seriously unhelpful. They need to put a date on this when it's going to be fixed. They're currently saying November. I have to say I've got absolutely no confidence that they'll achieve that. I think it's just a, yeah, indeed, which year? I think it's just a figure plucked out of thin air. The rowing between Northern Rail and Network Rail is very unhelpful, which is why I'm so pleased that Councillor Campbell and officers managed to get them both in a room at the same time. But I thank everybody for their support. It's an ongoing fight.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Any further speakers? Right, we'll put it to the vote. No, go on. I was just going to say after he's spoken, and you were just in time, Councillor Scott. Go on.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm in full favour of this all the way. Anything to help the rail in around the northwest and around Blackpool, I'm in favour for. The only problem I have, there's an individual at the moment who are encouraging the rail workers to strike all the time, and he's very much active on social media. A chap called Chris Webb, and he's causing a lot of damage, I believe, in the work that we're trying to do here. I think someone needs to have a chat with him. It's been on social media this week, and he has helped encourage the rail workers to strike, and I think it's going to cause more damage than is needed at this moment in time. Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any further speakers? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. But, I've been out with Chris Webb when he was handing the leaflets out, and the leaflets he was handing out were nothing to do with striking. They were purely like a scratch card telling you what was happening to you, which most of the people knew anyway. So I take umbrage in that statement. While I was out with him, that did not happen. I think he actually pointed out, if anything, or I did, the fact that our MP in the north, when he was rail minister, seen in a Virgin train with a Northern Rail train reflected in it, did nothing about this. Very, very little, when he should have been speaking up for the town. So if you want to talk about something like that, please get your facts right.
Sorry, you can't speak again, Councillor Scott. Are there any further speakers? Councillor O'Hara. Sorry, I didn't see you at the back there.
I'd like to come back on what Councillor Scott said, because Northern Trains could settle that dispute tomorrow if they were just being reasonable. But they're not even having any consideration for passengers. I was on Blackpool South Station Monday, sorry, and they actually turned the information off. So it's nothing to do with calling for strikes. It's a case of having proper trains running properly organised, and that's just not happening.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Now, can I just say that actually is nothing to do with the motion in question. We have digressed. So I have other people wanting to speak, as long as it is speaking to the motion. Councillor Hunter.
Madam Deputy Mayor, thank you very much, but it doesn't matter anymore. I was going to respond to Councillor Scott's comments, which had nothing at all to do with the motion, as you have rightly pointed out, so I will pass up the opportunity to say anything.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Definitely not. Last time? Because every time I go to give the right to reply, somebody speaks up. Right, quick, Councillor Collett.
5 seconds. Just to make it absolutely clear, that is a totally separate issue. That is about guards on trains, which is not what my motion is about. My motion is about a compensatory scheme between Northern and Network to allow us to do what we need to do. Totally separate issue. Thank you. Can we go over?
Thank you, Councillor Collett. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Oh my goodness me. Against? Abstain? We've got a full house of... Thank you all very much, councillors. I declare the meeting closed. Oh, gold.